motion to approval of the agenda? So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sue and Ed? Thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as a bundle for both February 9th, 2022 and February 16th, 2022? So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sue and Ed again. Public participation. Members of the public and staff may bring to the committee's attention information, ideas, or matters of concern related to all the duties and responsibilities of this committee. This committee will not allow comments regarding specific staff members or personal grievances. The time for individual remarks will be portioned according to the number of speakers and will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker unless extended by the chair. Jack McCoy, you can come up. You can just state your name and address.
Jack McCoy, 11 Timberlake Court. Good evening, Board of Education members and Superintendent Lebowski. My name is Jack McCoy. I'm a freshman at Torrington High School. I am vice president of the freshman class and an honor student. I'm also a part of the Unified Sports Program. I'm on the THS basketball team and hope to be on the baseball team. Outside of school, I'm a volunteer coach for the Torrington Little League T-ball program, and I work as a Little League umpire. I'm here today to express my disappointment and surprise regarding the board's vote to purchase yonder pouches last month. First, I don't think your vote to purchase yonder pouches is in line with Torrington's education mission. Torrington Public Schools state that it is their mission to prepare all students to be productive 21st century citizens by ensuring that they can think critically and creatively, solve problems, and construct arguments based on evidence. The student handbook further states that students will uphold the tradition of good citizenship by taking responsibility and accountability for their actions. When we graduate from high school, our phones are not going anywhere. In the real world, our phones will not get locked up by our bosses or our professors. What makes people successful in their jobs and in college is being able to balance their work and avoid distractions, especially given that technology is such a huge factor in our lives. Locking our phones up does not teach us anything except that we are not responsible and we are not in control. That doesn't seem in line with Torrington's mission or the student handbook. Second, the board's decision demonstrates that you might not understand how high school students are actually using their phones in and out of school. During the COVID-19 pandemic, phones became our lifeline and connection with our family and friends. We FaceTimed relatives to have big family dinners when we couldn't be together for a special celebration. We used our phones to connect with our friends. We also used our phones to quickly keep up to date with our assignments and grades without having to log into our computer 24/7. Since I started high school last fall, I've been encouraged to use my phone by almost all my teachers. We've been required to download apps on our phone to keep us in the loop. For example, in my Spanish class, we downloaded Remind, so our teacher could help us remember our assignments and important dates for tests and projects. I also use PowerSchool to keep track of my grades and assignments on a daily basis, and to make sure I know where I'm going, because to be honest, the schedule is a little confusing. My classmates and I also use our phones to study for quizzes and tests using various apps, and also to communicate regarding group projects. In fact, our teachers provide us with quiz and study sets that are easier to use on our phones. Furthermore, as a student athlete, there have been many times when I've gotten notifications through the Google Classroom app about last-minute changes to practice times, bus times, and even game times. As I'm sure you can imagine, it's important that we notify our parents about these last-minute changes. Third, I was really surprised to hear about the vote to purchase yonder pouches because I did not even think that there was a cell phone problem at THS. So far this year, I've not seen a single student get their phone taken away or get sent to the principal's office in any of my classes, not one. In addition, my teachers are using methods that actually work. I have one teacher who has us put our phones in the blue pouches on the wall during quizzes and tests, and all students comply. In my Spanish class, my teacher attached dollar store pencil pouches on the side of our desks. We put them in at the start of class, use them whenever instructed, and take them out before we leave. If you ask me, these equally effective strategies to minimize phone distractions are a much smarter financial decision than yonder pouches, and are a much better way for students to learn to be responsible users of technology. Finally, I think the board acted prematurely in voting to purchase yonder pouches. How often have board members visited THS during school hours? How often have you talked to teachers and students about cell phones? Have you collected data about cell phone discipline issues? Now that you have more insight from the student's perspective, I ask that the board reconsider its decision to purchase yonder pouches. I only wish you had consulted with us before you voted on February 23rd. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, George. Ali, is there anybody on the line? Discussions and next steps? Monthly financials.
As you can see, we're still trending under budget. We're going to continue to monitor this going forward, and I don't see any big changes to where we stand going forward.
Does anybody have any questions on the monthly financials? I had a couple. One was, I think you've told us this before, but I'm not sure I remember the CODA. I think it's only visible in the in this one.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure what that was.
Certified occupational therapy assistant.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Certified occupational therapy assistant.
That doesn't fall under sped.
Yes,
It does.
it does fall under those.
And why can't we hear you?
You can hear me?
No, it's still an echo, sorry.
It's probably going that way.
I have one more. The substitutes, so the, again, I was, oh yeah, sorry, I was in the monthly financial report, page 1 of 6. So I just wanted to, the substitute salaries and clerical are up pretty significantly, and I just wanted a little bit more color.
Probably not.
Okay, so for the substitutes, our substitutes are up because we've hired more internal substitutes as Torrington employees than what Kelly Services or Delta T, our other partners, have been able to provide. So you'll be able to offset it from the deficit that you'll see in those two lines. So we've had quite a bit more people that will become our employees. And that's also where we pay the retiree subs out. So that's also where you're gonna see some increases. Some of them are those people.
5120, yep. Yeah. Okay, and so that would be the same initiative for the 22-23 budget? Yeah, okay. I had one more. Yes. 5743, so that's on page 5 of 6. Again, another line item that was significantly up. And it looked to be kind of, when I read your high level budget, it seemed to be that they were trending lower than anticipated. So I was just curious what was driving up the non-instructional equipment.
We had to purchase dividers and things for some of the classrooms in different schools that have shared spaces so that they could have better social distancing and spacing. So these were things that weren't budgeted for that fell into that.
In this school year.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So should we be tracking those separately under the other FEMA items?
They can be moved. I wasn't sure we still needed to track FEMA any longer. Is that something we still need to track? Do you know?
We just submitted to the city some FEMA, but that was,
Last year.
yeah, request, but that was for big projects. It wasn't like for plexiglass dividers or things like that. So in terms of those smaller items, we're not tracking that anymore. Those are too small scale. If you're doing something that's huge, like a a ventilation project or something with air quality, then they'll be willing to track it.
On that same page, page 5 of 6, similar question just around the non-instructional text supply. Again, another line item that's significantly above.
We purchased.
Alan, the non-instructional tech supply, anything, is that, I know wiring is paid for by E-rate in a lot of ways, but anything else non-instructional tech supply that would bring us up a little bit?
I'm not sure, I'll have to look at it.
Okay. That one's on page 506.
There's a large-
5650.01.
There's a large encumbrance. So I can look that up.
So we can have that for you.
Perfect.
For you for once.
Anybody else have any questions on the monthly financials? Okay. TMS roof structural engineer RFP.
Yeah, so as requested by the board, you wanted to see the RFPs before they go out. This was approved by and requested, the approval was requested by the mayor that there's funding available. Am I loud enough? And the board, that there's funding available to have a structural engineer come into the middle school and do an analysis of the roof. So this is the bid document for the structural engineer. Specifications were written by Tremco. They're the manufacturer, roof manufacturer. They work a lot with engineers, so they gave me the baseline specs for the bid document.
Anyone have any questions on this RFP?
Just one.
Go ahead, Gary.
So following Tremco's spec, will we be allowing whoever bids, I don't know how many will bid, to offer alternatives?
This isn't Tremco spec. This is just it's just a specification for a structural engineer. It has nothing to do with Tremco at all.
And then, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Misunderstood. Did you find the drawings?
Yeah.
To get to them, so they don't have to read, they don't have to do a
Yep.
deep dive?
Yeah, so once we go out to bid, all that information will be provided for them at the bid walkthrough or the bid meeting.
Thanks.
So as long as the board approves it, that they're okay with what's in here, and we'll go out to bid, send this out.
Just curious with this, do we vote on this at full, like, would we move this to full board to vote? Would you like to move it to full board to vote?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Maybe can I ask one other-
Go ahead, Leonard.
Just on the, not awarded to the lowest bidder, with the charter, isn't it that it wouldn't be as long as it was a local company?
It's
Do we need to add that?
6%. If the local company is within 6% of the lowest bid, then they could opt to take the bid at the lowest bidder's price.
So do we need, because it talks in here about part of that, but not all of that, so we need to add that in?
What page?
I'm sorry, I just had it.
The page number's at the top.
Yeah, it's at the top.
I think it's page 27.
So also on this first page, request for proposal.
That's just the process, though. That doesn't have to do with, I think that's going a little too far. So you just, right now, you're just looking at the RFP for the structural engineer. The process is a separate thing that we just,
Yeah, that
Wrote up as a guidance.
2779 is not part of the
yeah,
document.
that's, yeah, the RFP process draft is separate for the budget committee to talk about the RFP process. So it stops,
Page 26.
correct.
I'm looking at this front page here, request for structural engineering. Request for proposal, structural engineering.
Does it have a page number at the top?
Is it 15?
Oh, 1779, sorry.
Looks like it's the last sentence of the first paragraph, where it says it further reserves the right.
To other than the low bidder.
Right, that
And
points to the charter. I can change the wording on it so that it's specific to the charter.
I don't know what everyone else.
I think it should be,
Yeah.
just so we don't get another town who wants to match the lowest bid. If that's what the charter says, if it's a local,
The charter says 6%, the local bidder is within 6% of the lowest bid with their bid, and the board has the option, or the town has the option, to give it to the local bidder at the lowest bidder's price.
it just doesn't say that.
If they'll accept that.
But all it needs to say, and this is what it does say, is that the board reserves the right not to award the contract to the lowest bidder. It doesn't need to lay out the circumstances under which that could happen. It simply says, you're not guaranteed to get it if you're the lowest bidder, which is true.
Yeah, This is our boilerplate bid document. I developed this about 2 years ago. So everything that we bid, this has been what we bid it as. This is standard language that the attorneys have put together and stuff.
Right, but if you want us to tweak it, I mean, we're talking about the budget, the RFP process tonight. So if we want to change it.
I think we should reflect what the charter says, just to be specific, so there's no questions going forward, especially for those bidding, so that they're aware of what
Okay,
we're looking
so
at.
I will edit that. You'll have the edit for the board meeting. It'll be something hard to do.
No.
It's coming.
Easy, Nikki.
Gotta do the roof for Julie.
Go ahead, Ellen.
So procedurally, this committee wants to send it to the full board with John's edit.
With the change.
Yes, with the quote from the charter.
Okay.
With them.
Any other questions on that document? Okay. Bid process review, which I think is page 27 of 79.
So we have a lot of policies on awarding of contracts, and you see at the very top, that's clarified there. So I'm sorry, Ellen, but that's probably a policy committee meeting. But we just wanted to clarify so that everybody knows what happens throughout the process. So Lynn, you want to talk just a little bit about what happens with state consortium, and then what happens if we go out to bid without using the state consortium?
When we choose our businesses and contractors, we have the choice by town charter of joining anyone that's on a state bid list, which is the state consortium. The businesses, contractors, and companies are all vetted by the state of Connecticut, who gives them contracts for specific items. So they then share that with every school district and state and local government, so that you can piggyback on their bids, so that you can use their fully vetted process instead of having to start at ground zero. if you can't find someone that's in the state consortium to get the specific good or item that you need, you go out to bid, and anyone can bid as long as they meet the requirements of the bid. And the bid would need to include the companies that are 6% of the lowest bidder's price, and then that would assume this is the way the charter is written. They would assume the lowest bidder's price if they were local. Now, we currently have done, we send things out to bid. We've also, to expedite processes, have gotten state consortium bids for you. We just want to clarify how you want us to do this going forward.
I'll say my opinion. I think given what's going on in the state, we better be very careful. I know there's more coming down. And the list may get very short on the state consortiums by the end of the year, I'm told. So I think it should always be go out to where we can get the bid on it that's qualified. I understand the state has had a list, and I said this in the last few meetings, but that list is being looked at very closely right now for the reasons I was always concerned about, which is sometimes you have to make a donation to get on the list. But, you know, right now it's tough to find bidders, but I still think it's best for our district if we go out without going just to the list, but rather to those also not on the list, because some people who don't make the contributions don't get on the list, and I don't think we want to be in that position a year or two down the road. And I'm not saying anything's been done nefariously. I'm just saying in general, the list is being looked at differently than it was a year ago.
Not necessarily as vetted as they mean to
Right.
let us believe it was.
So just for one kind of clarification, the state consortium list, they publish their prices for goods and services, is that correct?
Yes.
So it's entirely possible to send something out to bid. Now, it'd be a little more work on the part of our central office administrators to send something out to bid, and then if we weren't content with the prices or the bidders, we could then turn to the state list and just enlist a contractor from there.
Yes.
Right?
Good point. Yeah, I think it's good.
So I mean, I think that's probably the best way to strike balance between legitimate concerns about the integrity of the state consortium list and, you know, safeguarding taxpayer dollars. Because sometimes I've seen it, certainly the board has to turn down bidders and send something back out to bid because the people who bid on contracts sometimes just send in sort of exorbitant rates. And in those cases, I think the state consortium list would probably be a better bet for us than just you always accepting a bid from a list of bidders. So that would be my preference, would be if we're gonna kind of holistically do this process, would be to send things out to bid, and then if we're not happy with it, maybe we could be presented the alternative options from the state consortium list to consider.
In contrary to that, and not to be a jerk or anything, but they don't publish every single price they have. The companies are basically, what their state contract's gonna say is, they're only gonna mark up their product X% over their cost. Now, the companies on these lists may have different costs from different vendors. Okay, so it's not necessarily gonna say, product A is gonna be $100, well, it might be $110 from somebody else because it's 19% above their cost. Saying everything's gotta go out to bid is gonna make their life miserable. The point of buying off a state contract is to keep things moving and not delay things in a long, lengthy bid process. $10,000, it seems pretty low. Is that what this is saying, that anything over 10,000 has to go out to bid?
Yes.
Okay, so anything under 10,000, you can purchase off state contract at will. I just want to make sure you guys understand that it's not just, everybody's prices are published, because they can't list every product that they carry. It's really a percentage above their cost. That's normally what state contracts are. So it's kind of, you still got to get proposals, and I don't know, 10,000, maybe we increase that, keep things moving.
We've talked about that before. We should talk about that too again. I don't know what the magic number is either. I don't even know what the average is. So.
Go ahead, Jason.
Just in talking about that, so from the state consortium list, do you have to physically approach at least 3 of those companies to get a quote outside of a bid process? Is that how, I guess I'm trying to just figure that out. So you approach 3 different companies to do the route.
Basically on a website, we go to the state's website, the DAS website, and we look for the items that we want to put out to bid.
Yeah.
And we find the vendors that have been given that contract with the state of Connecticut. In many cases, they itemize what they're selling that the state is buying from them. And in many cases, you're absolutely correct, they do a percentage over cost. It's a lot of work, you have to go online, you have to look them up.
So ultimately, if you were to choose someone on the state consortium list based on what they've published as their items and their overage, you don't necessarily get a final cost until you agree to use them and they look at the scope of the project and then give you that cost. Is that?
We ask for a quote.
Okay. And then, but you're not tied to them.
No.
Okay, so there is a bit of a bid process involved in using the state consortium as there is for not using the state consortium.
We contact the vendors, we ask them the prices, ask them if they'll honor the Connecticut state bid price. They send us a quote, we compare.
So it's a process regardless.
Yes.
Okay.
The problem with that process is we don't know what the market is. We just know what the state bidders are, and I'm not gonna get into the politics of it, but there's a lot happening, and it's the way it's always been. Like Glenn said, I mean, we can get markups, but we don't know necessarily what the costs are. I think it's a good check if you want to go through that process, but to find out what the market is, and again, 10,000 might be low. I don't even know what we typically go out to bid for, but if it's over $20,000, $30,000, we could be missing half the market because we're relying on a limited supply of vendors. But that's just the way it used to work.
Go ahead, Ed.
Just sort of as an aside too, I'm also I'm a little less zealous about this bid business. I've generally been content to sort of accept the recommendations and expertise of administrators and my fellow board members. So, I'm also sort of fine with a little bit more flexible sort of rule of thumb here. If folks come to us with a project and say we can get this at a really low price, as has happened before on the state consortium list, I'm not opposed to doing that. I think ultimately the considerations just have to be, are we going to get services as advertised, and are we going to pay a fair price for them? And sometimes that's going to end up being a bid process, but sometimes it's not. So, even if we do want to set a sort of hard rule here about this dollar amount when we want to go out to bid, I would set it fairly high. The vast majority of our projects and purchase service contracts are going to be worth $10,000. So, I think there should be some room for either some flexibility or a relatively high ceiling before we say definitely go through the bid process, because I think Glenn's point is apt, that sending every single purchase service and project out to bid is going to be terrible. So I definitely would be interested in working out some kind of more flexible scheme that makes better use of our administrators' time as well.
Go ahead, Jason.
Is the bid process, the RFP process for any project, regardless of where the funding's coming from, grants, general budget, anything like that? Or is it only for money that comes out of, say, general budget? Or is it for any project that the board does, regardless of where the money's coming from?
So that actually poses an interesting question, because when we talk about the school security grant that we just received, that all of those quotes that were sent out to state vendors were actually they were quotes to state vendors, and then the state awarded us the money based on those quotes. So now if we go out to bid and there's a savings, all right? There's actually gonna end up being a reduction in the amount of money that we received on the grant because we've already given them the numbers of what, and those vendors are holding those numbers for us right now pending approval. So it does get a little dicey.
Or conversely, if we go out to bid and it's higher, right? We only have a certain amount of money in those security grants, so.
Many times the grant projects are already approved by the state and the federal government based on what we send in. So like the window project was already approved. So we know we have $1.2 million.
But okay, so then, so this process then is I guess that's what I'm trying to clarify, because this process doesn't necessarily state what we're using this for. Is it for just general budget stuff, or is it through grant stuff, or is it for all of it? And I guess that's kind of where, I don't know if that needs to be clarified, because, yeah,
I think more it's clarified in the grant,
okay,
because sometimes you'll have a federal grant
yeah,
and they'll say you can only use, and they'll put the stipulation on it. But if
okay.
it's general budget, yes, it's easy. We have to go out to bid.
So
and
that's what this
whatever
is.
the project. We want to try and make that consistent, but you're right. I think we're going to have to put stipulations in the new policy that talk about what are the grant requirements, because we've had grants this year that we've never had before,
Yeah.
right? The ARPA ESSER and, you know, COVID relief money and all those other things that it made it difficult to figure out who was giving approval for that and what was the process.
So my own clarification seems is that our policy would be in place unless a grant stipulation came into play, kind of like.
Right, where you'd have to adhere to the grant
right.
requirements.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Fiona, did you have something?
So part of the reason we're bringing this is because no one should be guessing what we should be doing, right? So we should set the parameters of expectation so that they're not wondering, can I take this? Do I have to go out to bid? Like, it should be clear what the policy is so that we're not looking at it on a project base. Because what's happened, I think, is they've spent a lot of time on stuff and then, you know, it gets to a point, it's so far down the road and it's not where the board thought the project was going. So I think just putting it on paper and having everyone be on the same page as far as what's supposed to happen helps, right? And like the security grant, I think, so if we bid it and it came less, why wouldn't we just do the project for less, I guess? And if it bid higher, the person that gave us the estimate, why would they bid higher? You know, so I can see all sides of it.
Well, it gets crazy at least with that, it gets crazy because we already submitted those projects and those costs to the state for the grant award. All right, so they've already accepted the projects that we submitted to them, right? We had to give them a budget. Donna had to put together a whole budget. I had to give them all the quotes on all the projects. We had to put everything together and send it into the state. And then they went, okay, yep, nope, yep, and they approved everything. So then they sent it back to us and said, here's your grant award. Okay, so the anticipation is that we would expel X amount of dollars. Now, if we're going to wait and go through a full formal bid process on that, you know, whether there's a reduction in money or an increase in money, it ends up getting crazy with us. And then with Donna, with all of the budget mods and all these other things that we have to go back and forth with the state, and ultimately ends up delaying the process even longer.
So then I guess my next question would be then, how do we pick who we get these quotes from? Because my concern is I don't want it to appear that we're, you know, preferential treating certain companies. So, you know, so then on the other side of it, then what would be our criteria for who we allow to
We picked three
bid
companies.
these large companies?
That's what we did, like for the radios, we picked three companies. We got 3 quotes back, and we picked the lowest of the 3 quotes.
They were all on state contract, but they had differing amounts, like you said, the over and unders. So one had this cost and the other had 10% over that cost. So the bigger companies usually end up having economies of scale that give them better pricing. And
turned out that one room was much lower.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, that's.
Go.
I mean, the economies of scale doesn't really hold for many construction and service related. I mean, it depends on how we do the other work. I think it's a very poor way to do it. We're gonna get in trouble someday. I know some things that my son, he's DOT commissioner, he's involved in a lot of this stuff. And the processes they have to go through as a community, whether it's a state fund money that we're using or it's a city fund, we're obligated to make sure that those dollars are spent in the most efficient manner. Going to a state list is very easy, but it may not be the best way to go. I think those quotes we got the last time, I don't know if they were firm quotes. One said subject to site visit. The other one was a budget, the other one was a quote. So, you know, it has nothing to do with anybody that works here. It's an easy way for contractors to go out and throw a number at something. But unless we go through the process and determine, enforce it, every contractor should visit the site in order to put a price in that matches the amount of work needed. But if we're just going to a state website and asking them to give us a quote, there's not a lot of effort put in on their part when the number of subcontractors is limited. When you open up the bid process, it forces the many subcontractors out there to think about the projects and to work toward what they want. I mean, it's an effort on their part to get the bid, so they're going to work hard to get the bid. Or harder, I should say, than being on a state list. And that state list is going to be whittled down pretty soon. There's a lot of problems with that list. And there's no comfort on my part to go out to anybody on that list these days, given how it's functioned. In some states, that's illegal, especially over a certain dollar amount. So anyway, however, I think Fiona's there. I agree, we need to have
Just make a suggestion. I'm wondering if we should move this to policy, only so that we can have the city charter in front of us.
Do we move it, you know, after, like, I was gonna ask if we have are we anticipating many RFPs between now and like, I don't know, June or May, somewhere in there?
So if you're looking at the security stuff that Ally and I and Nick D'Agostino worked on, there is 5 RFPs there? 5 RFPs of that. You know, we've got whatever comes, I've got capital RFPs that have to come. You know, and one of the issues that we currently are facing with the current situation with the school security is that right now there's at least one of the companies is holding a price for us based on an increase in price from Motorola. If we choose to do the RFP process and we go through that whole process, we're going to lose all those discounts because there's an increase that's coming. It's a 20% increase for Motorola in their cost of their equipment. So if I do it now, I can get it at the cheaper price and get what we want. If we wait and we do the RFP process, it's going to end up costing us more down the road.
Just, Ally had her hand up first. Go ahead, Ally.
So as part of, to add to what John is saying, technology works a very interesting way when it comes to bidding. You also have what's called incumbent pricing. As part of incumbent pricing, which many vendors that we do business with, whether it's HP, Cisco, or Dell, any vendor that we currently do business with will automatically, unless we tell them otherwise, get the largest discount. So it will be not possible for any other vendor to go below that pricing because that's the pricing guideline set by these companies. So for example, I can see for anything that I get quotes for, I can see 4 different prices. I can see a market price. I can see the suggested retail price, and I can see 2 different state contracts. And on top of that, we usually end up less than every one of them, only because we've done business with a company in the past. For example, our Cisco discount is 57%.
Yeah, did you?
I'm just wondering, I really don't want to delay the walkie-talkies especially.
But yeah,
I thought we agreed.
So would the board consider moving forward with the security grants and the existing ones and then send to policy
Going forward.
to determine, you know, with some more research, I think, too.
I thought we already approved it. I don't say go ahead and do it. Walkie talkies.
I think we did.
I mean,
The
regardless of
last,
whether we
the
did
last
it.
request on the walkie-talkies was that we go out to bid and do an RFP. That was from Gary. I had contacted the company to work on an RFP process for that. The problem with the RFP process with the walkie-talkies is that in the charter, it states that we can't be name specific. So the vendor one of the vendors that we were working with really spent a lot of time to come up with an equipment list to go out to RFP, go out to bid on that, where it wasn't name specific, so we could still get the type of system that we were looking to get. But we were never given the approval to go out.
Yeah, I wouldn't want this discussion about RFPs to disrupt any project that's like moving ahead or about to move ahead.
Yeah.
That's what's important. It's not important to argue about whether or not we approved it. It's important to do whatever needs to happen to make it move.
Well, we say that all the time. I mean, but it was approved and Jess brought the motion up and we approved it. I never said anything about not going to RFP for the walkie talkies, but let's just move on from that. This is why we have to have a process that's very well defined, that's very certain,
Agreed.
and that says exactly what you can do, because I don't care who we bid from, whether it's HP to steel contractors, they will give us the best price if they're hungry. And this kind of confusion can't happen when we go through this process. It just can't.
I think we're all in agreement that we should move into policy and really kind of lay out those parameters. In regards to the security, do we need to like go back through the minutes to confirm and then add it to the agenda for facilities on Wednesday? Or I don't know what we do
It
there.
was not voted on,
Okay,
because the last that was left, there was some confusion on, we thought we had already given the approval to order them, but then all this came up and everything was kind of put on hold. So I think at this point, if we encompass all of the security items, understanding that we'll detail this out more for future projects, but that is, you know, just getting delayed at this point. So we can just get that one moved off the ground and then.
I'll say I'll go along with it. I'm going to tell you right now, we have nothing that tells us what we're getting. We saw the bids, everybody saw the bids, some of them never even walked through the school. So we go ahead and do it, that's fine. But understand that we still don't know exactly what we're getting for this number. And it was never clear.
What was that number by, I'm sorry?
250-some thousand, maybe?
257.
No, it's actually 201,000 and
That was the
I don't know exact, it's 201,000, somewhere around.
okay,
Because
do
we
we,
can't just order the walkie-talkies as part of the whole communication system, so we either need to approve it to proceed this way or go, yes.
oh, sorry, Jessica.
No, is this an executive session matter?
I think Jess thinks, and I agree, that the discussion we're having right now is material from an executive session.
Well, we talked about this in open session.
We have, okay.
I mean, anyone can propose to go into executive session.
I'm not, I'm just,
No, it's just a question of how much from executive session regarding security do we want to discuss in open session unconsciously, so to speak.
How do we, so just, what do we need to do to move forward with, because I think we kind of have a little bit of an agreement amongst the board that we do want to move forward with the security, use this RFP process for future projects in alignment with policy. So what do we need to do? In what meeting? It has to happen at the full board, right? We have to move it to the full board? Okay. So I think we have to move it to the full board for March to vote. Is that right?
Can we get copies of the bids? I never got a copy of the bids.
Right, it's not on our agenda, but the chair of the board can place it on the board's agenda at her leisure, and I think that she will. It's not on our agenda, so we as a budget committee can say, oh, we should move this forward.
Oh.
But Fiona can just place it on the board's
Yeah,
agenda
I
at
mean,
her
the bids
leisure.
are moved.
And we'll include the bids. But what would you like to do with the structural engineer RFP? Do you want that to go to the full board or do you want that to wait? Because that one, we need a response relatively quickly also, because that's the route.
That can go to full board.
That's a TMS. That can go to full board?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would be under time.
Good on that? Yeah, okay. Food service RFP.
I hope we can have you service RFP for your perusal.
We can't change anything in it because it's data that comes from the state. And it had to be approved by him and we had to go back and forth for many weeks. And this is the RSP.
Right, that the state creates. Right, that's, that one you don't get choice.
So we're just reviewing it.
Yeah, it's basically, it's for your information, it's, they can't hold on. It's
No, just move it to the full board, just information.
to
And
accept
then
it or
they, yeah,
rescind
you
it.
can accept or receive it.
Will you just, will you be keeping these dates? Because I know this was for kind of the meeting last week, so I didn't know if you would be adjusting any of
And
the
the
dates.
dates have changed because Andy changed.
Okay, that's what I was thinking you would need a little bit more
So
time.
I'll give you the corrected dates.
Okay. Any other questions on the food service? Okay. Alliance update.
Okay, we'll bring all the different grants with all the different salary line items on Wednesday to our next gathering. But also the Alliance piece that has changed is the addition of 2 deans, one at the high school, one at the middle school, that will be coming out of that funding. Wanted to make folks aware that those are new positions that have been proposed by the board. And the request was made that we have a dean at the middle school as well as in the high school. There definitely seems to be a need for both.
But we're going to talk Alliance.
More, sure,
on
but that's just the alternative.
The only thing I noticed was they weren't prorated, but they probably should be since it's only for the second half.
Right, they will be.
Yep, okay.
Yep, but we have to post it with the salary.
Okay, but in the Alliance grant, they should only be prorated, right?
Yep.
The only other thing you mentioned, a Wednesday meeting, I didn't think we had a budget
Oh, you're
meeting.
right, we
just have
this week
sick and
is sick and
facility,
facility,
okay.
sorry.
So we'll, I guess, have to plan the next
I'm losing track of my budget.
budget meeting after the next meeting.
You're gonna wrap it all up tonight.
It's for the day. Okay, any other comments on Alliance update? All right, possible FEMA reimbursement.
So when we met with the mayor, she said that they are still working on big projects. FEMA had reached out to municipalities to talk about possible FEMA reimbursements, and they had a very quick turnaround, and they were just talking about any projects that we may have done or may have, that may fall under this umbrella. We got very little information, very little parameters. Once again, so this is from the feds, not from the state. So we have no idea what will be reimbursed, what won't be reimbursed. I know that John and Lynn worked on some different items just to see if there could be some funding, because it would obviously benefit the city, would also benefit the district, because then projects would be done, district projects would be.
Yeah, just quick on that. I did speak with Ray Drew, who submitted the application into FEMA. And basically what was said to me in the meeting with Ray, or the phone call with Ray, is that it may not necessarily be funding that FEMA is providing. It may be services. What they're going to do is they're going to look at all these projects, and then they're going to match the projects up with different federal organizations that may be able to help and provide services or funding or a combination of both. So it may be not necessarily funding so much as it might be you know, the Army Corps of Engineers has a structural engineer that they can give you or something like that. So that's sort of what the FEMA project is.
So you have to provide, if this isn't just getting reimbursement for the gloves or the masks like it was previously, this has like a whole other
No, this
project component?
was, what it was, what was the name of it?
It was a capital.
No, it was, distressed
Oh,
municipalities project. And what they were looking for is they were actually looking for a list of large, what they call large projects. So it's nothing like gloves. So it was actually like we gave them a lot of stuff off of our capital plan, the roof projects, whatever was in our capital plan. We gave them, I don't know, like 15 projects or something like that, that we submitted into them. We really had no criteria as to what, we weren't given any paperwork as to what was qualified or what wasn't qualified. So we just gave them a whole list, a bunch of projects, and Ray submitted it all in. It was the day we handed them the projects was the day that the thing was due to FEMA. So we kind of got this, towards the end. We did the best we could, and, we may get something, we may not get something, but we're going to give it a shot.
I think just even more reason to get that facility study, done. So we have these things, if any more of this kind of comes along.
Absolutely agree.
Any other questions? Okay, we can move on to the 22-23 budget, and then at 6 o'clock we will end the budget meeting and start the public forum. And if any members of the public are going to speak, we'll allow them to speak and then continue the discussion.
Do you want us to just give you all the updates, because we have even more documents for you? So you want to do that now, and we'll review it, and then we can start forward with all the new information that might help.
Sure.
So if we start passing those things out, and this is in regards, we'll review all of it. And this is in regard to the questions from the other day.
I'm sorry.
That's right. While they're passing out, can I just do my own I want to say something based on the last budget meeting that we had, the public forum. The question or the discussion of process of presenting budgets from the facility, from the buildings to district was brought up, and I made mention about my never being asked about the process. And I want to make sure that it's known that I have gone forward to my administrators of things that are needed throughout the year, and they're always very willing to give that stuff. And each of the departments are asked for their budget requests, and they do talk to the departments. Now, as a special ed department, we don't necessarily fall under a curriculum. So we have it's kind of a difficult thing for us to know where are we requesting stuff from. So I just don't want people thinking that Laura and her team aren't talking to us, or that they're not, because they are, and we are getting tons of stuff from them throughout the year. We don't necessarily have that. We don't necessarily know when to do that when it comes to the official budget that you're presented. So I wanted to clarify that. I did speak to some of the people who do the different curriculum areas, and they do get asked what they need, and they are brought forward to the principal. And then I know that, and then I know that it's always been asked by the board, well, what was the amount that was given to district administration? Like, what was that big number before it was culled down? So I just wanted to make sure that that was known, because I feel like I may have misrepresented the process, and I didn't want anybody thinking that people were being left out. I think at the formal process in October, November, how special ed teachers bring that information forward to be presented to you to then be budgeted out. But we don't always know what we're going to need in September or November for the following year. So I think in talking about that process, to just have that information put in place. So I just, yeah.
Okay.
Should we, just a procedural. Once they finish passing out, should we move on to,
I would adjourn this meeting,
do I have to do topics for future meetings and?
Yeah.
Okay,
close out this one and then open up the next.
okay.
Thank you. No, it is what it is.
Sue, does this one go away now?
Yeah, really, yes. Six pager. So all this. Yeah.
Summer one.
Figure out how to solve it.
No, it's okay.
So 1 of 6, 1 of 8, so that makes sense.
So we'll probably be okay. That's enough? Yep, really.
No, she doesn't count, right? We get them? Yep.
Okay, just so that you know what you have in front of you, because I know that Nikki wants to be.
Can we just wait till the next?
Oh,
Sure. That way Nikki can finish.
Everybody has a 183. I have 2.
Okay, so, we're just gonna continue through on this meeting, and then we will jump to the public forum for the 22-23, and Sue will walk us through all the documents we received, so topics for future meeting.
Financials. Yeah, you're gonna do another line. Yes, okay, so let's- Let's go to policy and just more budget discussion.
And then any of these, like the RFP, would that go to facilities or come back here? Like the structural engineer and food service?
It's a local board and the structural engineer will go local, so we can remind ourselves that RFP can come back for future meetings. Yeah.
Oh, I already did topics. Comments for the good of the order.
No, all set, thank you.
Good job. Good meeting.
I was interested in the location of the new skate park. There is a city council meeting on March 21st where they're going to be discussing the location of the skate park.
April 6th, work and rec meeting, right?
Nope, Marissa? Yeah, all set. Ally?
I'm sorry.
I'm totally fine. Any comments?
No.
Okay. John?
No, I'm good.
Maureen?
I'm good, thank you.
Kim?
All set.
Lynn? All set. Sue? All set, thanks. Sue? Thanks. Motion to adjourn?
Oh, that's
And all those in favor?
And see you at 6 o'clock. John, I'm coming for you. That's
Corey,
Here.
Gary Galito, Ellen Hona here, and Jason Lafreniere.
Here.
Do I hear a motion for approval of the agenda?
Second.
All those in favor? Gary, Nick. Public participation. Members of the public and staff may bring to the committee's attention information, ideas, or matters of concerns related to all the duties and responsibilities of this committee. This committee will not allow comments regarding specific staff members or personal grievances. The time for individual remarks will be proportionated according to the number of speakers and will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker unless extended by the chair. No speakers? Ali, is there anyone on the line? So we will move forward for the discussion on 2022-23 budget. Okay?
So, if you want to go through the title waiver papers that you received, they go under the update section. So this is what you'll now refer to in your documents. You don't need to go back, okay? But some of this just includes what the board requested. So there's an enrollment sheet, and typically you get this every single year, and it now breaks down further the elementary schools essentially, and you can see what the sections are. So Torrington, Global Wetmore, what the enrollment and sections are this year, and the average class size, and what the projection is for next year. And it also obviously includes Forest and Southwest, and then the middle schools at the bottom for the grade levels. We can go through any questions that you have. I'm just going to kind of go through the documents first, okay? When it says enrollment at the top. Did you get that one, Glenn? It says enrollment as of 10/1. We always use the 10/1 because that's the state, when the state does the draw for our attendance, okay? And then the process, and Jason just kind of reminded folks in terms of the roles and responsibilities and the process that happens at the site. I know some people were questioning the process. This is a process that we've used for the last 10, I think probably 20 years. If we want to change it up or do something different, you always can, either during this process, or if you want to change something that happens in November, December, obviously we'd have to change it for the following year. Someone had asked for an update on capital, just to give you the summary. You do have the capital budget in the binder, but this is the capital plan summary. I think it's easier if you are able to look at the summary. And that's a one-pager. And then I also included the capital plan request rationale. That's what was presented to you in December, and that was also presented to the mayor when we sent our capital plan. I know we have a lot of moving parts with capital plan because we've been able to get the security grant, which is wonderful. So to be continued. And then the capital technology budget. The one that says budget is the correct one. For some reason, you have a capital technology budget. There's an Apple one in there. If you don't go by the Apple one, just go by this one. This is the most updated one. I don't know how the other ones are. Correct. So let's see, most of the other documents, textbooks, trade books, and online resources. Sue can give you a little bit more detail about that. As we move forward, I know that some folks were asking for the 640s or books and periodicals, and Sue was speaking to textbooks, trade books, some that we have online, as well as some that are specific to the different grade levels. So this gives you an easier way of looking at it rather than trying to flip through each and every school site and trying to see what's under their 640s. Okay, and if you forgot where to find that, that's fine. We can show you where those are. Most of the rest of the documents have to do with personnel. So Kim was nice enough to give us the FTEs, the historical history. That's the one that has 2010 all the way up to 2022, 23. And then you can see historically how things have changed. And obviously, over the last 2 years, just the grant funds, you can see where we've been able to fund more positions, more staffing through grant funds. The reason why there's a change between 2022 and 2023, we had included city ARPA in this current fiscal, and we had also included the 2% grant. That's not in the proposal for 22, 23. The staffing, hopefully this is an easier way for you to look at this once you kind of get comfortable with it. So what happens, it's pretty clear all the way down. And then that will correlate to what you see in the big 83-pager in terms of the staffing. So this is an update. And then the summary of the 83-pager is pages 1 through 6. Okay.
Can I just, because as I'm looking at that 1 through 6, it looks like it's just giving us the books and periodicals in each section.
You are correct. So that will go with Sue so that you don't have to look it up.
Okay.
Per site. So I would put that next to your textbooks and that document that says textbooks, trade books, online resources. I think that would make the most sense. And then we will get you the pages 1 through 6, that little summary. They just happen to both be 6 pages. Thank you, Jason. And then the page 1 of 83 is the detail. And hopefully gives you a little bit more information so that you have it.
Go ahead, Fiona.
Were you guys able to print the custodial analysis?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we had that too. First up.
It came in email, I didn't print a copy,
That was that.
or could we print it from here?
Oh, we passed out capital, right? We did have it.
Yeah, no, we got it through email, I just didn't.
No, we literally had it this afternoon. It's blue, has a little blue center.
Where's it there?
Ally, did you receive it?
Sorry.
John, can you just send the document to Ally? John, did you send it to Ally and
For the
then?
most part, I have the speaker here, so for half, all I hear is people shuffling, I don't hear anything. Sorry.
Can you just send the document down?
I don't have my computer.
What's it look like?
Oh, I can forward it.
Yeah, it came in the budget.
I think
I'll forward it.
Yeah, I got it. It was just buried in there. We had it. Sorry, a big box. Thank you. I saw it. I think it was there. It's got all of it.
No, what I'm saying is that.
And as you're getting the custodial sheet, one side actually has the guidance as put forth by the American School and Universities, the ASU, in terms of that medium level for schools. And then on the other side actually gives you the number of custodians that we have at our sites, and then the recommendations based on that middle level 3.
Go ahead, Fiona.
So I'd like to make a recommendation, with the new building coming and the desire to try to keep our buildings better.
Are you on the
I'm on the
custodians?
custodian
Okay,
one.
all right.
If you look at the middle school and high school specifically, we're extremely understaffed. We're not going to be able to obviously add all of these at once, but hopefully we can add a gradual plan to get us at least closer to what the industry standards are. The floater is great. We're still gonna have absences to cover, but I think we also need some additional people. And I think looking at it this way makes it evident how understaffed we are. And, you know, they're doing a great job, but they can only do what they can do. So I'd like the board to consider looking at some additions to this department based on the information.
Sorry. Are you still on custodians or did you want to?
Yeah, no, I'm still in custodians.
Okay, then go
No,
on.
you go first.
I just kind of to that note, I was just wondering why we have, it almost seems flip-flop, where we have 1 day custodian and 2 night custodians every school, with the exception of the high school, you have 2 day, 3 night. It almost seems like,
In the middle school.
and the middle school, that should be reversed. You should have more we should have more during the day.
No,
They can't clean during the
no,
day.
the reason why the
Well-
levels are set the way that they're set is because the cleaning of the building happens at night. So the 2 day custodians at the middle school and high school and the 1 day custodian at your elementaries, they basically end up cleaning about 10% of the building roughly. They have a few small areas that they clean, but they're running all day long. It's a nonstop, go get paper, go fill this dispenser, clean up this spill. So there's very little cleaning that they can actually do because they're fulfilling so many other duties throughout the day.
I'm curious because we spent some time at the middle school a couple weeks ago and there was just garbage all over the floors. So, and I'm not knocking because there's 2 people there and it's a huge building. There should probably be 3 or 4 people there. But it's clearly an issue. I haven't come through the high school during the day yet, but it just,
Maybe that we're short.
right, we're just short. Not saying that they're not working hard, you need more.
We've been short-staffed for some time now with a few custodians that have either left the district, and we've just gotten clearance to do the hiring now because we've come with all agreements to the union, so we'll be able to refill those positions. And then we had quite a number of custodians that have been out sick. Whatever those sicknesses were, there were some extended outages. So for instance, currently at the middle school, you only have 1 custodian on during the day.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's the best that we can do with the cards that we're dealt right now.
And you didn't get any takers on the custodian substitute positions?
Actually, we have six substitutes right now, and we are fulfilling most of that substitute custodial work at night. We wouldn't use the substitute custodian for day work because it's just such a different animal than what a substitute custodian could handle. So we would always pull a custodian down from at night and put them on days if we needed to, and then fulfill that job with
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I distinctly remember in my first budget on the board that budget eliminated the custodial position, and I believe, though I could be wrong, that was a middle school position. There are a couple people around the table who might remember. And I asked about it, and everybody said it would be fine. And here we are 5 years later, and I'm just gonna take a second and say I was right. But in all seriousness, it's been a problem for a long time that custodial, clerical, et cetera, positions have been steadily eliminated from Torrington Public Schools as we try to, get by on leaner budgets without laying off teachers. And that's where we are now, where there's one guy, I assume this guy, who's now stuck trying to keep the middle school clean while there are hundreds of teachers in the building. So I personally would go a step further than what Fiona suggested, and I'd be interested in putting multiple custodial positions, as many really as you think you need. You just can't, in the same way that you can't expect students to learn in a building where there are no cafeteria lunch servers, you can't expect students to learn in a building or all the other employees to work in a building that is, falling apart because there just aren't enough hands to keep it together. So me personally, I'd be interested in hiring, or at least putting into the budget and seeing what we can squeeze out of the city, as many custodial positions as you tell us that you need.
The recommendation would be what's on the right side.
I'd be in favor of plugging it all into the budget.
So I think if we could keep the running list, and then for the next meeting, what we can do is you can bring forward everything that we kind of talked about, and then we can have that discussion of the impact of
See the cost.
Yeah, I just want to say that too, this is one of the things that I know parents have brought up as a concern through this process, so it makes sense.
So the max, based on the right, it looks like a max of 8, an increase of 8.
No, the top part on the right where it says 8.1 to 8.9 is recommended. What we have in the building, we'd be increasing by 3 to 4.
Right, so, but I'm saying going all the way down, so you have 1 at
So,
Bogle,
yeah, so it would be a total of
One in
8.1 to 8.9, custodians total.
which would bring us back to where we were just about in 2010, 2011 with 33. We're at 24 now, or we're looking at 24 for next year. Proposed, we were at 33 back in 2010.
So my question is, so we have a range there.
I was
So
talking
we
about the
say-
whole thing, John.
Right,
Oh,
so
I'm
if
sorry.
you look at
Misunderstood.
the middle school and the high school, are we saying, just so that I get the calculations right for the next meeting, 2 middle school, 4 high school, 1 Torrington, 1 Bogle? Or are you saying 1 middle school, 3 high school, 1 Bogle, 1 Torrington?
No,
I counted the maximum, I counted that high.
And then we'll see what the cost is.
Yeah, right,
Okay.
well, have
That's
to
fine.
decide what to do. Sorry, I've been ignoring you. Are you on custodian still?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you can go.
Well, it's just to Fiona's point, and not just custodians. I think we need to ask for whatever we need this year. And then get pushback, because we've gone for 10 years now asking for what we think they'll approve, and then they approve less. So
There's nothing.
identify what we need and let's ask for it.
I think this analysis really helps to show that we have a deficit, so I think this is very helpful, so thank you for putting it together. Go ahead, Glenn.
To Gary's point, which is more important, daytime or night?
So with the 3 to 4 custodians at like the middle school, there would probably be another day position that would be added out of that.
Because you're
And then some
increasing
more.
by 1 to 2, so if you get the 1, would it be a daytime position or nighttime?
If we get the 1, it would have to go to night. That's when we need the cleaning in the
So
building.
19 time is
Yeah.
where you need the
So the
most.
2 custodians that work during the day, they could handle the day when we're fully staffed. The floating position could potentially pick up that when we miss that one's custodian because of absences.
Is there a budget difference between the daytime and nighttime guy?
Yes,
Yeah,
they get a
They get a differential.
A differential.
75 cents.
75 cents.
75 cents, yeah, right, it's 75-cent differential.
So what we're asking for is kind of important to know whether it's really a daytime position that we need or a nighttime position.
I could get those numbers for you, specifically on what I'm looking for.
I don't need them, I'm just saying it's something to consider. If we're gonna try and squeeze out 8 people, let's pick the ones that we really need.
Yeah.
And then for budget purposes, is it a daytime guy or nighttime guy?
Yeah, so just define it on
Yep.
that running list.
Can I just say, I know that the contract was just ratified, correct? And
Yes.
was there an increase in salary? Because I know people who I've mentioned that we probably have openings, and they're saying that where they are currently doesn't necessarily compare, but they may have been looking at old data, and I'm just wanting to be able to go to them, because they would be great people for me to try and bring into district, but I want to be able to say, no, look at what the new, so was there an increase in pay?
There was an
And
increase
it's-
in pay, and it is currently on our website.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Fiona, just back to your original question, are these the numbers that you had in mind for when the building is done? Or is it something that you want to look at again in the future?
I don't think we know that yet. I'm just saying, if we're this severely understaffed,
Okay, all
that
right.
we need to have a plan of getting appropriately staffed.
So I can also take and build the standards in for, we know that the building's 306,000 square feet, so I can build the standards in for what we would need for custodial staff for that, knowing that there's two sides to the building. We already know that we're gonna have a couple of head custodians, one for each side of the building, and then they'll work together in the common areas. But I can build something so that you can see what that would look like, at least from the new building's perspective.
But the anomaly is we don't know at this point if we're gonna be maintaining all the buildings. So I think that's kind of a hard sell at this point. You know, I think-
Probably use it in the future.
Right.
Right.
But what we know right now.
But I can at least it'll have to be some information for you. Okay.
Go ahead, John.
John, is it easy to hire custodians? Are they out there for us to hire?
That's a trick
You know what
question,
my next
John.
question's going to be. Among the ones we hire, how many do we retain?
Actually, believe it or not, there's a lot of longevity in our custodial staff. It's pretty interesting. You have one sitting in the audience tonight, he's got 30 years in him. So
The best of the best.
he's the best of the best. And if you don't believe him, just ask him, he'll tell you.
I'm gonna talk to Chris on the way in too, and he's been here a
No,
long
we
time too.
actually,
So do we have decent retention? Because.
yeah, we actually do have really good retention. We do, there is not a lot of turnaround with our custodians. It has been a little difficult to get, especially in these trying times, to get people to come to the table that are qualified to be in the buildings. But Kim and I worked along with her team and the union on a great new hiring practice that's going to help us to put qualified candidates in place, and we're excited to get started on that. We've got a couple of positions that we're going to be filling over the next week or two.
So if we authorize it, you won't have any trouble filling?
No.
It's good to hire people who actually do the work in the system. Good to have more of them around.
No, it's still one of those jobs where they like the job, they like the environment that they work in, so. And on your way out, you can ask him, he'll tell you.
Yeah, the Chris I was talking about before was Chris Cashman on the way in.
Do we want to move to the textbooks discussion? Unless there's anything else on custodians.
I just want to ask one other question based on, because John's kind of on the hot seat, is these capital projects, were these the ones that were sent to that FEMA thing?
Some
of those were? Okay.
Go ahead, Gary.
Hey, John,
Yes.
still on, I guess, technology or capital plan, you mentioned something about some state mandates. Are those going to be considerations that we need to build into next year? The airflow and those kinds of things?
Yeah, so that's interesting. In this legislative session right now, there's a bill, Ed Corey can probably tell you a lot more about that because he's got his heartbeat on the legislative session. But there is a bill that's up for approval about air quality in schools. I actually read it today. Lynn forwarded it to me. It's a 10-page bill, and it's rather interesting on what they're looking for air quality in schools. And there are specific timelines that come on August 1st, 2022, and then subsequent July 2023, 2024, there's certain target dates of things that are going to have to be done. One of the ones that was most fitting, try to make it as brief as I can, was a specific requirement of temperature in the buildings. And if you don't meet the specific requirement of temperature, Mrs. Lombomsky, you'll have to send the children home. Oh yeah, it's quite interesting what.
What's the temperature range?
68 to 76.
That's impossible.
I think the bill is a little, it's a little dicey when it comes to some of that. Hopefully they'll hash it out a little bit better. They're looking for test and balancing of all the systems by 2023 by a certified test and balance agent, which is at the expense of the district. So that's a pricey endeavor.
Council's aggressively we fighting it? That's the Connecticut Association of School Business Officials.
Yeah, there is a,
Aggressively fighting it.
there is a forum that you can, I'm actually gonna dial in tomorrow, because I'm very interested to see where it's gonna go. But it's at 10 o'clock tomorrow, you can dial in and you can watch what happens, and if anybody in the board is so interested, I can make sure that we can get you the link so that you can dial in and see this. It's just rather interesting, it's a little scary.
Is it a public hearing or is it a committee?
An unfunded mandate, exactly.
Is it a public hearing or is it the committee meeting?
I think it's a public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Lots of bills get public hearings. Lots of them die right after.
That's awesome.
But we should have something on the radar for 22, for August 22, whatever that may be.
Well, the 22 is more about getting yourself set with some indoor air quality. They're kind of rehapping the Tools for Schools project, but at a different level. So that's the 22 target. The 23 target is going to be the interesting one, because that's the one where they want testing and balancing. And then the 24 target is, we want air conditioning in all your buildings.
And schools that are 50 years old don't have the infrastructure to be
Yeah,
able to
it's-
put the HVAC systems in. So I would say maybe 80% of the schools in the state of Connecticut won't be able to meet the standards.
I am gonna sit and roll through the public hearing tomorrow, because I'm quite interested in this one. So,
This particular bill may have legs because CEA is behind at least the whole initiative on air quality. So,
Well, that and FEMA money, I mean, the federal government is sending FEMA money out, and they're asking that part of the money be
well,
go toward that.
the bill has legs because of what we just went through in the pandemic and
Right.
how important air quality in the buildings was. Not only from the CEA's perspective, but from the DEEP's perspective, from the EPA's perspective. They all dove in, public health dove into this heavily. So that's why it's got legs.
and it's an election year.
But it is going to put the burden on all of the municipalities in the state of Connecticut, and they won't be able to support it.
Of course, it's a state election year, not a local election year.
Well, it still should be part of our budget discussion at the city. We get there because we can't ignore it if it passes.
Let me get through the public hearing tomorrow, and if there's some update or something I need to bring forward to budget that we need to look at, we can share.
Or sure, when, or regular board,
Yep.
anywhere really.
Go ahead, Fiona.
So just as a point of order, so our capital plan has already been submitted, and we can't change that. All we can do is that when we go to the city for our April 26th meeting, is to let them know of these type of things. But we can't actually change our capital plan at this point.
Can we, because I know we talked a little bit about like the security grant piece, like kind of coming out based on the grant that we received. Would we revise this and include it as like part of the full ask? I mean, even though we already submitted it?
No, so statutorily, we have to have it in December, so all we would be able to do is request any ask for changes at that April 26th tentative meeting with the Board of Finance.
Sorry, hold on a second. But so we should still create like a working capital plan, right? That would take out the security and pretend, I know that's just a thought, but should we create a working document?
Yes,
Okay,
outside, but it wouldn't be, we can't alter.
Right,
this
it wouldn't go in
document.
here.
We would just have an addendum
right,
to request, and they can just say no, right? So,
okay.
These are millions of dollars.
So maybe we can just like, and then I was thinking we could add like the tech line here, just so we can see the total that we're asking.
Put capital and tech at the top.
I think so, right? Because we combine them together for the total capital request.
So let me just, so I understand, are you looking for me to do an update to, even though we're not changing requests, you want to see an update to the plan where we reduce the items for school security? Because it is a working document. I mean, capital plan is always a working document.
Put a big draft across
For
the
next,
top.
okay.
So we know.
No, sorry.
Oh,
we have to keep our capital
Yeah.
plan, I think we just need a separate document that shows what got approved in security grants
We can keep it as an internal document.
as an internal document.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just curious, I just want to make sure I had it right so I can get you what you want. You know, I'm good at that, Nikki.
Get better.
Oh.
Actually, air quality, I know a couple meetings ago, we were talking about, I forget the guy's name, Aaron from JCI, he was gonna come in for the energy audits. Is that still?
He was on the agenda. I think he's on facilities. Is there an update on that?
That's April, right?
Yeah, in April.
In April?
Yeah.
I'm sure he's in tune with all these
Yeah, good point.
things coming up with the air quality and stuff. If we can kind of maybe get out in front of him and say, hey, we have questions on this, and he can be prepared. And
This isn't, that's not, it seems like that's what it would be, but what he's going to be presenting to you is something much different than that.
understood, but he's probably well aware of these changes coming and maybe give us some foresight as to what to plan for.
Yeah.
While he's here, might as well pick his brain. He's an HVAC expert.
And what programs they may have. Because you know they're gonna jump on it. Not just them, but everybody. This is not gonna be tens of thousands, this is gonna be millions of dollars.
Any other questions or comments on the capital plan portion? You, Dr. Nelson? Do we want to move into the textbooks, or is there energy anywhere else? No.
I have questions, I do have some questions on tuition. That might be quicker.
Where are you?
Tuition, just in general, the tuition costs for my own clarification. I know the sped costs we absorb if a child has to be outplaced, but do we also pay for non-sped students to attend Region 6 and 7 and the magnet schools?
There's school choice.
Yeah.
So they do that.
Region 7 and, no,
It says 6 and 7. What's Region 6?
yes,
And what's 7?
it's Region 7. The Northwest.
They're
Northwest?
both- We're both. And all the magnets.
Now the magnets, those aren't paid for through that CREC program?
So we pay for them.
So they
They're
apply,
still
they
our
get accepted
students.
and we pay for it?
It's like a fixed amount that they're allowed to charge.
Right.
Yes.
I would say relatively low.
And then parents have to transport to the magnets. If they're sped, we transport.
Right, but then there's also, there are buses that are afforded for, or provided to the magnet schools and things like that, right?
They organize
In
that
Harvard.
They typically have a pickup point that's central in certain
Yeah, I
areas,
think
so
there's
it
one
might
on
not be right
202.
on your bus corner anymore. Like, you might have to drive them to another school to pick up, but yes,
Yeah.
they do that.
I guess we can go on to textbooks. I have.
Correct.
We don't
I'm just going through I had just wanted some clarification on that. Oh, you know what, too, on the gas,
So you're not on the handouts, you're on something different?
I'm just asking about the gas in general. the
Right,
cost.
so what page are you on and where?
I think she's looking at a summary of all the,
Yeah, so it would be under energy. Let me go to, it is 506.
Like in the 506 of the
Yes.
old summary?
Yes, because the new one is, we have to wait on that.
Okay,
For 26, so,
so 562002, page 506. February
Yes.
22nd.
so this is, and I didn't check it yet, but this is based on $1.47 a gallon. Right?
The bus fuel?
Yeah,
Yes.
propane bus fuel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that matches, that's the same as 562002, right?
562002.
Is the propane bus fuel bid results that we got, the handout for 5 years, right?
It's 2 years with a renewal going forward.
So it's, are we guaranteed, are we locked in for $1.47, $1.40, and $1.35?
Yes, the first, whatever the results of the bid were.
First 3 years, okay. So what did we pay? We paid less than $1.47 a gallon last year?
We had a contract for, I think it was $1.21,
Okay,
and then before that, it was $1.05,
okay.
because there was an extension to the contract.
They can't charge us more.
The point, clarification, in other years, we've been burned on the other side of that, right, where we've locked in at higher rates have went down.
Oh, I'm sure. I just wanted, it's just such a huge difference as to what we're looking at right now that, I mean, that was great. I doubt it.
On page 1 of the 6, I did have a question on the administrator's salaries. So it's showing up for the total up 12%, 320. And I just wasn't sure what was driving that up.
We moved 2 salaries out of the grants and we moved them into general budget. So they're no longer in the lines.
Do you think for the next meeting, you could just get that recap, like, just updated to show, like, all the movements? You know what I mean? Like, because I'm in the beginning section, but it shows like 6 English learner teachers district-wide are moving in, but we don't show the admin positions. So I think this like additional savings and reduction should
I think it would be easier to, so we're bringing the grant so you can see, and I thought I thought I sent that to you over the weekend, but if not, it's okay. I'll make a copy of it for our next meeting, even if we're not doing budgets on Wednesday. Where people moved from what grants, because I think some of it is confusing, and I think if we view all the grants, some of these positions are grant moves, and some of these are general budget moves. And it's really easy to get confused, because this year we have more grants than ever before.
Right.
So it would be better if we can track it, and then we can chart for you. I know it'll help to use some of the class documentation, because then you can see where certain positions are going up, and then we'll break it down.
And where it's got funded.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that'd be good, because I think to understand all the positions or what positions are in here either as new or what's moved from grant, I think is important to the full story.
Yeah.
I had another question if anything else did. So below that on the teachers, that one of 6, so it's 2 rows below the administrator salaries. So teachers are about flat. Follow my thought process here a little bit. In the budget explanation letter, you talk about contractual increases. So I was surprised to see teachers flat, given there's such a big line item. So I guess my question is maybe what's the makeup of those contractual increases that are making up the significant portion of our?
So we can break that down, but remember that they will have their contractual increase. But we've also had a number of teachers over the last few years, in particular the last 2 years, retire. Or some people unfortunately even left the teaching profession. And so as we rehired, we're hiring at a lower rate. So it's not a 1-for-1. So I think that's why you're seeing the delta go down and narrow.
Or level.
Right.
So yeah, then we have,
Some of our enrollment is down, particularly at our elementary schools. This year, we had less students at our K-3 schools still. So there's changes there.
okay.
So I can read you some of these things.
Yeah, and if you could just break out like that 2.6% that's being attributed to the contractual increases, just so we can kind of see how that's what the makeup of that is. I think that might be like a good little segue into that enrollment by class school document. They can provide it, and I know what I was surprised by was the Vogel change. So you had highlighted it again in the book that fourth grade was losing one section at Forbes. And then it looks as though second grade at Vogel was down one section. Is that? Oh, no, you're fine. Is that's also a reduction?
So we do have another reduction at Vogel in terms of the second grade. Thanks for catching that. But we do have that increase in Torrington at the first grade. So basically, if a teacher's teaching in that K3, it's a wash.
Okay.
What grade is the addition at Torrington?
First grade?
It's going from 7 sections to 8, but maintaining. So I know when I was kind of looking at this, and we had talked about this, I think, a few years back, knowing some of the challenges that we are having in that K through 3, potentially even kind of K through 5 with behaviors, is 21 where we want to be on how many students in a class? It seemed a little high, just given kind of all of the new, I don't want to call it new challenges, but all of the challenges that we're facing.
And that would be something that the board would have to decide. Traditionally, we have gone from 19 to 22 at K3. You can see that even at our 4 5s, we're within that range. We've been really fortunate. We've been able to keep within that range. There have been times at the 4 5 where it's actually been higher. It's really,
knowing that we have, a portion, 15%, I think Laura has the SPED numbers at, 10, 11% are ELL, that's a chunk of students in this makeup that
Right.
that the teachers have to, have
Focus
additional.
on, and yeah, there's additional effort.
Yeah.
Put in.
Go ahead, Ellen.
If you were to add another class, then what would the number of kids be in each class? And is there room in the school to have that other class?
right.
I think that
So
would
this
also
is-
be a challenge or a consideration.
Absolutely.
Right, especially at Torrington, I know they're pretty packed. Forbes the same, actually even Southwest. And right now, we do have a lot of supports for our students, particularly at the elementary. We have 6 interventionists at Torrington and at Vogel, and I believe we have 4 at Forbes and Southwest. So we are very fortunate in that way. We have the extra EL support within the classroom in Paris, as well as our TESOL teachers and our bilingual teachers. So at this point, I feel like we are well supported. Why I proposed these numbers.
To pick up on what you brought up, but I don't know if it's the number of the class or how we can help those that are in the class move ahead, having the ability and the ability to move ahead. I mean, I don't know, and maybe it's a deeper dive as to, there's 21 kids and 10% of the class or 15 should be held back, but we don't hold back. What does that mean to the next 7 years? And how do we fix that? And maybe it's fewer students and more staff to catch everybody up, because there is a problem with catch up. There is a problem with, we want these kids to get better grades and better outcomes. And I don't know if it's just numbers, but really it might be part of everything, and how much we might be missing overall, or maybe not missing. I don't know, but I wouldn't just tie it to numbers. I would tie it to, are these kids learning what they need to learn? And are there too many SPED kids in the class? I know it's a state mandate, but there's a lot of things I think that we should take a hard look at.
Well, and that adds to the differentiation that the teachers are expected to do in the classroom, right? If they're all at the different levels, which makes this number, even with supports, hard. And especially then if you're coupling it with some of the behavior challenges in that younger grades, and that's a lot.
I was in Mr. Lafreniere's class.
No long evening.
Well, he was co-teaching, but I don't know how you do with all the different issues in the
I
class.
mean, you
It's
guys,
not like
you
it
were
was 40 years
fortunate.
ago.
There were 3 of you, because you had the
We
para,
had the paraeducator for the ESL in the class, and
Yep.
then myself and
Mrs. Lurikia, and, I mean, you guys have a very good rapport, and it seems like you have a system going. But it's still,
But is that the best system?
right,
I'm not gonna ask
I
that.
don't know.
I'm not
I
gonna
mean-
ask you that question, but eventually, there's a lot going on in those classes. And I don't know how some of the kids can pay attention. Probably teachers can get that, whatever.
Well,
It's not your fault, I was just saying.
No, we're continually tracking the data, I think more than ever before, and at the next SIC meeting, we will have our K-3 principals present, and then so on down the line. All the principals will present by the end of this year, so you can really see that we are working harder than ever to make sure that we are filling those gaps, we are addressing those needs. And I do think that it really has been helpful to have the extra ESL supports, the teachers, but also Laura and her team have done a great job in terms of the SPED supports. And now you have the interventionist back and in full force as well. So I think it's helping. We can present those data to
I'm
you.
not saying it's not, I'm just thinking, for the other 80% of the kids, is it 60? I know that's crazy, but, maybe it's not 21, not because there's just too many kids in the classroom, but because we can't accomplish that limited amount of time with that number of students because of the different levels, different requirements in the classroom.
Go ahead, Jess.
I just wondered, like if money was no object, if we would have enough rooms in the buildings to get all of these elementaries, especially K through 3, down under 20 kids per class.
It would be really tight. I know that Torrington is tight as it is. Like I said, there is some room at Boca Wetmore, of course, and Southwest are pretty tight right now. So we don't have a lot of wiggle room.
Vogel there is though, there is.
Boca, there is some room.
Because we
At
have,
one point, I can't remember how many years ago, they had, every section had 7. So I know they have the capacity for that.
because their K and 1s are up over 22. So that may be an area that we can look at adding.
I did the math, so if we do add one more, it brings it down to 19. Because I'm just like that.
No, that's good.
Yes,
Yeah, just to kind of wrap up the discussion too, even if there isn't classroom space necessarily to add more classrooms to reduce that number, I do think that it's a worthy discussion to consider ensuring that more classrooms maybe look like Mr. Lafreniere's, where there are 2, 3 staff members in there where appropriate, and if we need to add those staff, then we ought to give it a shot. I don't know a lot about classroom education as to whether that would be a silver bullet, but it strikes me as something that may help.
to clarify, the reason why I'm in a classroom is because there are students in that class who have IEP. So it's a service, it's an IEP service for co-taught class. Your general ed classes that do not have IEP needs could have 25 kids with 1 adult in it.
Right, and that's that's sort of the core of my point, that maybe it would help that some more of our classrooms have more than 1 adult in them, offering that help. And maybe it wouldn't, I don't know how to teach in a classroom, it's not my skill set. But if it's something that people think would be helpful in the context of adding positions to a budget, I, for one, would be interested in doing that in the same way that I was interested in adding custodians.
I think that's a really good point in terms of how to, with all these additional supports, what does that look like actually? Like, whether it's the time blocks or like how do we get down to making sure, all of those positions we even have in alignments are the right positions.
That's why we look at the data constantly, more and more. And so I do invite you to come to SIC because we will be featuring, the principals will be sharing their data their fall and their winter data and the progress, which would be really great. We may even have some, I don't know, that's a stretch, right, to have end of the year data. Sue's giving me the evil eye. So probably not for the secondary, but you definitely will have the fall and the winter, because I know I just met with the principals for their mid-years, and it's great to see the progress that our students have made. It's good.
I think I just want thinking to like next year, how do we have those meetings and discussions like prior to budget?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So we're having those discussions in sick, and then it's feeding into this discussion, but that's for next year.
The 5 o'clock or the 6 o'clock meeting on Wednesday?
I think it's the 5 o'clock.
The 5, okay, just to finish that thought about cutting the sick meeting.
Thank you.
I just had a question about the high school because that keeps increasing. So with the additional credits we're requiring and 173 extra kids, do we still think the one English and one art? I know that one's been growing as we go. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the enrollment and then just the staff additions. Because we're gonna try, obviously, to encompass the new credit requirement, right, plus all these kids. So what would we be looking at, I guess, in like a standard classroom at the high school for English? Like, you know, not for tonight, but maybe just to get, it just seems to me like a lot of kids and a lot of extra credits, we have to get them all.
Yep, so right now, they are working on the registration, so that they can do a month run of the schedule. And so they're trying to make sure that the staffing meets the enrollment requirements. We're getting our numbers back from Oliver Wolcott, where the other from region, from Mogo, from region 7, just so we have a sense of where those students are going. But less and less students are going to Oliver Wolcott. They're coming back to us, which is really wonderful. I just want to finish this thought, Jason, before I forget. And then the other positions that are in the grant, there's a capstone teacher that will be taken. You'll see that in the Alliance as well. In addition, an alternate program teacher, and there's one other high school position. I don't know what it is, that's also in a grant. But I can bring those next time so that you can actually see those, and those positions will be listed as open, and they'll come out of Alliance for the most part.
Just one last question, kind of relative to the high school. I know that they're just starting the work about the potential merger with Litchfield and Wimogo, but do we have any inclination if that goes through, if they're going to continue to offer the BOAG option?
I think they will. Yeah, I think that's the plan. What they decide to do, who knows?
The question on that merger is Litchfield's attitude to having Torrington kids come to the combined school. Just a comment.
We'd love to have them.
I'm just wanting to know if we're getting 125 kids back.
Go ahead, Jason.
So just a couple things on that. What is the cap number that we pay for kids to Wimogo? Is it based on the last 3-year average or something? So we should only be, what, around the 5 or 6 kid mark?
It's only for the freshman incoming class.
We'll get that for you next time.
But
in
just
terms of
the other reason,
tuition amount.
and it was just because the 373 that we're seeing for 9th grade next year at the high school is just a rollover of the 8th grade from this year, which I know that number is probably going to go down, probably not as much as we've seen in the past because people are staying, but I am seeing the numbers, being the 8th grade teacher, having to do some of these transition meetings, and we'll probably be, I don't know, maybe around the 320. I'm just throwing a number out there. So it will go down. It's not all 373 are going to the high school. So So
Yeah, but even if you say 50 less, right?
Right.
It's
still a lot more, right.
Yeah,
It's
that's
still
not we've ever had. Yeah. And we have to make sure if they're staying that we have enough offerings.
Yes.
To.
Go ahead.
I have a question on the handout from tonight dated 3/14/22, the 22-23 Torrington Public School salaries. Under number 20, first page, the grant, teacher coach 1 and teacher coach 2, what positions are those? right at the bottom of the page.
They are teacher coaches at Forbes. Those are, and actually, I
Right,
can,
because it's at the school.
yep,
But what's the,
so
what is their role?
I actually have. So you want to talk a little bit about what coaches do? It's the very first, it's the top where it says teacher coach literacy, teacher coach numeracy, and those are the funding sources. I'll pass these out now because I did actually find
Is
those.
that your question, Sue? What's the role of somebody?
Yeah, what is the teacher?
So an instructional coach is someone who works with the teachers to improve instructional practice, to make sure that we have best practice happening, cutting edge stuff. We have them in all our schools.
We have them
We're very
in school.
excited. Yeah.
Is that similar to the department heads at the high school?
No.
Okay, no, it's different, okay.
No, it's different. So we have coaches at the high school now too. So we have a STEM coach and we have a humanities coach. It just, it's a nice opportunity for teachers to be collaborative and collegial and to, work together to sort of provide continuity across the discipline. And
Yeah.
just make sure that we're
And
exciting new things.
do the coaches communicate with each other or
Yes.
report up to
Yeah.
you?
So, well, at the secondary level, and at the
There's two more
elementary level, and
Okay,
yes.
great.
And then they work together and they run coaching cycles in all the buildings and they work as a collaborative team themselves to improve their own coaching practices.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Interesting, that's great.
Thanks. Sure.
I have 3 of these.
Hi, John.
Since we seem to be asking general questions, we are moving some teachers around, tech teachers from the high school to the middle school, and then hiring at the high school an art tech teacher. How's that choreography going to work?
I don't think we're moving anybody from the high school to the middle school or middle school to the high school. We're just asking for an art tech teacher
Right.
at the high school.
But, so we're not moving any of the current teachers from one level to the other? Okay.
Not at this time.
Thought I interpreted something now. Okay, so just one extra art, what's an art tech teacher do?
They'll have, obviously they'll do art, but they'll also do it, right now, Victor Legier kind of does a combo of that where they're using the technology. Ally could probably tell you better than I can in terms of using technology to represent art. So they use, graphic design and things like that. So they'll use the music tech room. They won't need to use our art room because they're going to be creating art on the computer. That makes sense?
Okay, I'm thinking non-fungible tokens now and things like that. Okay.
Go ahead, Jason.
I guess I'm just looking at this document that we started looking at, the personnel. We need 11 ELA teachers at the middle school. Why don't we need 11 math teachers, 11 science teachers, and 11 social studies teachers? Or are those positions, so if I'm looking, and these aren't numbered page-wise, so I'm looking at the middle school, because I know that we're cut a language arts teacher due to decreased enrollment. It has language arts is 11 teachers, math is 9, social studies is 10, and science is 9. So if each student needs to take each of those subjects, how are we reducing the number of teachers in those? I guess I'm just the numbers wise, because if you need 11 for ELA, wouldn't you need that for math, science, and?
No, because that breaks down into the win. And actually, if Mr. Scott, if you're here, if you want to speak to that a little bit better in terms of the schedule and how that breaks down overall, I think that would be helpful for. Come on down.
Yeah. Sure, so the breakdown of the numbers that Jason was bringing up started as carryover. 6th grade used to have separate reading and writing as 2 separate courses, which is why we have that many ELA teachers. The reason for the uneven numbers in terms of science and math versus social studies is we do now offer a WIN course that we have designed, which is around a personal interest project that teaches important research skills, communication skills, and writing skills that the students then present. We designed that course in conjunction with Ed Advance, and it's been a course that we were brought on, and that's going to be run through the social studies teacher.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
I had a, okay. No, I have a general question, so if you wanted to finish.
I just had one more specific around the EL that I know I had brought up last time, and I thank you for providing the detail. I'm still just really questioning where the budget's coming in, given that there's 6 new positions, because when I look at just the teacher budget, it's down 14%, right? So I just summarized it for ESL teachers. That just doesn't lead me to believe that there's 6 additional in there.
Okay, so when you go to the EL positions, when we were in, you have to go back to the mindset of 2021, 2022, okay? So when we created this budget, we didn't know if we were getting city ARP or not. So what happened was Ed put those positions in anyway. And so that's why they're so high. So you may say, why did it go down so much? Does that mean that we don't have the teacher? We do have the teachers. They really still exist in there, but it's that kind of weird, funky thing where then we got the funding from the city. So when we go through a regular budget meeting in April, May, because we're getting closer to the end of the year, you'll start to see salary transfers, and those will be presented to the board because that needs to be cleaned up so that we can still purchase other items. But it's just something that we really couldn't bet on, and that was a board initiative, so Ed wanted to make sure it was there, so we had it in there, but then we were lucky enough to get the city ARPA.
Okay, that makes sense. And so then when we look at the monthly financials, the salary line, just for total simplicity, should be reduced by these teachers.
Not exactly, because you remember, it won't be a 1-for-1.
Right.
I know, I wish it were too, but remember, we probably will have hired at a higher rate than what we put in for the 2022 school year, because it's a guesstimate, right? And sometimes it's a lower rate because somebody's new to the profession. So we wish it were a one-on-one exact, but it's just not.
Okay.
So
it's just a large amount, so I just want to.
Right, and so you'll start to see some of those transfers.
Okay.
And then the board can make some.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jess.
Okay. So I wanted to ask about these budget narrative sheets. There's one for each of the sites. They look like this, just so you guys know what I'm talking about. Can you talk a little bit about where these, like this mission statement and these goals, how and when they were decided, like where does this come from? And does this information have a bearing on the budget priorities for each site, or is it just kind of presented anecdotally?
It was just an introduction so that people who really don't know about our schools, they have a basic understanding of really global, really general. When you go to the SIC meetings, you really see the strategic plans from the schools, and that's really where you're going to see the nitty-gritty and the detail. And then even more so when we do the portrait of a graduate, and that's really pre-K-12. So you're going to get a lot more nitty-gritty, and you're probably going to even have revised versions of this. This is really more just like the advertisement, to just kind of do the cover page, to just give some basic general information.
So where did these come from?
Each one of the principals created their mission statement and their school goals. And very often, especially for elementary, they're working together because we've asked them to time and time again, especially K-3, and then also 4 or 5. And then the sister schools also work together, so you see a lot of commonality, K-5, because we want to provide consistency for our families. And then you'll see a little bit of difference at the middle school and the high school. Once we get to a new school, you'll see more collaboration there as well and more consistency.
Yeah, I noticed it looks like 3 of the 4 K-5s are the same, and then Torrington is the outlier, and then middle school and high school are different.
Right.
I mean, I guess I was asking about it, and this is maybe a discussion, if this isn't driving our budget per se, then this may be a discussion for a different meeting, but I would like to have this discussion, because these goals are 90% SEL, 10% academic, more or less, a ballpark. And I would hope that our goals for our schools would have more to do with increasing student learning and achievement and making sure kids can read at level and all of those things. And so I would just like for us to maybe pick this back up. If tonight isn't the time, that's fine, but talk about what are actual goals for our schools. Are they quantifiable, achievable goals? Things that we can actually look back and say, hey, did we meet these goals? Because these are not that type of goals. So I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe we can talk about that in more depth another time.
Sure, I think that almost in folks' minds, as we were welcoming kids, especially back from COVID, and even from the state perspective, SEL became very, very important. So I'm sure that that was on folks' minds. But as I said, when we get to Portrait of a Graduate, you're going to really see even more consistency and more focus on the academics as well as the whole child, right? Yes, you still are dealing with social emotional, but you're also dealing with that academic.
Are we, just to kind of piggyback on that, are we able to get the strategic plans of the schools that was presented at SIC?
Sure.
Do you mind?
I think they're even on the website, on each person's website.
Okay. Or send me the link, or, you know, or send us all the link, because maybe.
What are you looking for?
The strategic plans that were presented at SIC.
I mean, I looked back at one of the SIC meetings from last year just to see if this material had already been presented, and it was not the same thing, which was part of why I was wondering where this new material came from.
Yeah, this was just a cover page just so that you had some focus of, okay, we have all of these, just somebody new to our district, okay? What's the basic focus? What are the schools? Just an intro. It's not specific at all. It's just global.
I think those goals and events were shared with the school group committee members maybe, and that was the whole board.
Yeah, or just send us where Valley puts it in Google Drive or anywhere. I'm sure she's already, she'll have it done, but just so we can kind of, I don't know if that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I already have all the stuff that was good for SIC,
Okay.
and I don't think this is the same stuff,
Okay.
unless I'm mistaken, which I could.
No, it's separate.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, this says
it's different.
22, 23, which we're just embarking on that, so.
No, I didn't know if the strategic plans address some of the academic, that's the reason why I was thinking that.
I mean, it's definitely worth sharing for the people that didn't get that message too. Absolutely.
Did you have a question?
I was just going to reiterate what Ms. Slabowski said, is that if the students' basic needs aren't being met, which comes from the social emotional, you can give them the best lesson in the world and they're not going to get the academics. So with coming back from what we've just gone through over the last 3 years, there has been a greater focus on SEL because we're not able to get those kids. They've lost a lot of socialization having been home. So we are dealing with a lot more, and I'm hoping that we will eventually be moving back towards that academic piece of it. But you're absolutely right. The majority of what we're dealing with is social emotional, and not as much the academics as we may all want it to be. And it's very unfortunate, and you know, we're trying our best to get there, and we've got the supports to do it, and we're struggling to get to that point.
I mean, the problem is that kids keep moving forward though, don't they? Right? We don't just keep them in the grade
And-
they're in
and
while they figure out their
that's-
social emotional issues. We continue to push them forward.
And that's
so we
another
can't push
aspect.
them forward if they don't have the learning to succeed at the next grade and the next grade and the next grade. So I hear what you're saying, but I think maybe we can have both those things in tandem.
And I
With
agree
that, we
with,
can talk about it.
Gary? Gary?
I do concur with what Jess is talking about. I agree with Jess. I understand what you're saying. But we do have to try to balance it better because we all know the kids are way behind in a lot of these grades. And, I see it in their expulsions. I see it in a lot of circumstances where kids are just being pushed out of school, whether it be 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, or 12th, well, whatever. And that can't happen anymore. It just can't. Because I deal with the kids, they come see me, I hire some of these kids, relatives included, and we're doing them no good. push them out of high school when they can't even function as adults. And I don't care how much social and emotional help they get, like my nephew, who I won't name, to get out of school having, I don't know, 10 credits, and have to work as a laborer, but really not be able to read, is not helping him for the next 60 years. So I agree with both what you're saying, but we need to address that in another meeting.
You're learning. Go ahead, John.
No, but there is a danger. Kids will think this is education. This NSEL is what education is, and sorry, it's not all that education is. They really do learn, read and write, and think, and explore. And if they don't get that,
So, sorry guys, so this comes up, it comes up quite often. What is the right channel for us to have the discussion? Do we need to bring in state requirements on some of that? I mean, is it like a topic for SIC at some point? I'm just wondering where we kind of actually have that discussion and
Get out the attorney and then.
hash through whether we can do anything or not, or what we want to do, and then.
Well, there's things we can do. It's a matter of having the people, and I think the educators in the room to really, make a final decision as to where we want the kids to end up, and then also have the attorneys tell us what statutorily we're doing. We don't know now what the statutory requirements are. That we're probably going blind. We're probably doing it blind right now.
I'm sure the educators know, but
So they can.
yeah.
I'm not saying they don't, but they can. They're experts. I mean, Jason's one.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm just gonna try and move to the next topic, because textbooks and technology and trade books and all that was really brought up at the beginning of the last meeting. We've had all this information brought to us. And my question then, I guess, is, some of the things that are posted here, textbooks and trade books, those were requested at the site level, but maybe through the district budget, not necessarily the sites, correct? That's all done, it's parsed out to the district budget, not necessarily the site budget, right?
It's actually a combination
Okay.
of both of those things. So if you think back to, I was passing things out when I was hearing you talk a little bit more about the process earlier, but if you think back to the way the process works, and, at the beginning of the budget season, when Lynn kind of does a quick PD for the admins about what the process is going to look like, and the admins sit down with the folks at the sites, right? And the folks at the sites are encouraged and invited to submit requests, to talk to people and submit requests. Some of these things come from that. For example, Gizmo Science, Discovery Education. Those things were direct requests from the middle school.
History Alive.
Yes, History Alive, exactly. Those things. What I tried to just put here is really just kind of, it just highlights it. This in no way is an exhaustive list. You know that, Jason, right?
Yep.
When I left our meeting last Monday, I felt like there maybe was a fear on the part of some board members that we didn't have enough instructional materials.
That would have been me.
Right. That was you.
Just based on
I wasn't gonna identify.
That's okay. It was just based on feedback that we've been getting and things that have been brought, just mentioned to us over the course of the last few weeks in correspondence that, it's alleged we're spending money willy-nilly when we don't have enough books, we don't have this, we don't have that. But that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did.
So that we could clarify
Yep.
whether we do or don't, or we need more, whatever we have to do.
So I can tell you that, and I mean, Jason, you've been in the district a long time too. I think because of all the funding that we've had available to us in recent years, we have more instructional materials available to our teachers than we've ever had before, ever. And on this list, again, it's not exhaustive. As I'm looking at it, I don't have here the Columbia Teachers College resource, which we have available to all teachers K to 8. I didn't even list that because we're trying to move away from that. I know that there was a question last week about an actual textbook, and I think what you meant by that was a traditional hardcover, comprehensive type of a textbook that takes children from A to Z, let's say in social studies, and covers, right, all that stuff.
Right.
So today, in 2022, we do have things like that, but they might not look exactly like what you remember them to be. So for example, If you look at the first item on the list, the Bridges math workbooks, that's a K-5 math, it's a comprehensive math resource. It's our core resource at the elementary level to teach math. They're consumables. It's considered a textbook. It's a consumable resource, which means they're replaced every year. The students are given, right, they
That
work
book,
with them,
yeah.
it's their book to own.
Yeah.
Sometimes they work in it and tear it out and hand it in. We have the same exact.
They saw that when they came to
We
visit.
saw the math
They
book.
So
saw
you
it.
saw the
Yep.
illustrative math, so that
Yep.
it spirals up to 6, 7, and 8.
Yep.
The foundations is another example of a consumable, working type of a student textbook. Trade books, what I was trying to explain, a trade book is a little bit different than a textbook in that it's a supplemental material, a supplemental resource that enhances the experience. So it enhances what the teacher is able to do. So if in the unit, for example, is on, I don't know, volcanoes, we might purchase science trade books that are all about volcanoes. Okay, so it kind of a
So the
whole-
trade book it's an extension of the lesson, a specific lesson plan, or could be an extension of the lesson.
It could be used as an extension, but it could also be used really as
Primary?
as a primary source.
Okay.
Yes. The geodes, and I don't want to go through every single one, but the geodes and the benchmark decodable texts are books that we're using right now, K-3, that are phonics based for our
Those are
students.
great, we talked about that last
Yes,
year.
very
Yeah, that's
exciting,
Awesome,
very
yeah.
exciting, yes. And then the open up math is what Jason said that you got to peek at. The English department at the high school has put in a request just for us to, not a specific request with respect to titles yet, but they're working on drafting some new electives for their department. And they want to make sure we earmark enough money so that when they decide what they'd like to use, there'll be money to buy stuff for that.
Great.
And
And another, I think, Sue, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think another helpful piece to this was, we're looking at the budget and what we budgeted $28,000. What that doesn't show is how many of these are actually grant funded, which is a huge, significant amount, right? So by looking at the line item, textbooks of $28,000 is misleading.
Correct.
So, yeah, I'm glad that we've had the conversation to clarify.
You're absolutely right. Now, here's a perfect example, and just so that this is gonna put your mind at ease. The open up math books, grades 6 through 8, those are about $45,000.
And it's grant funded.
Yes, yes.
With that, do we keep track of, because we get a shipment in each year and the book doesn't necessarily change year to year, so are we buying based on what we still have and not necessarily buying full for every kid? Because I know that there's leftovers.
You're not, you have to buy the whole 9 unit.
They do it that way? Okay,
Yeah.
that's unfortunate.
But we are looking at the scope and sequence. That's a whole different
Yeah.
conversation.
We did talk
You know,
about
the vocabulary text at the high school uses, they're very fond of the Sadler or Oxford vocabulary book. And after a while, and they're not consumables, but after a while, and they've been used by many kids, we have to replace class sets. So we do that too. And then the second box down there, that table, is just examples of also some primary and supplemental resources that don't have a traditional textbook look to them. But in this day and age, they could be considered textbooks.
Because they're online. And even, it looks like, well, the licenses, most of them are general budget, but some are grants.
Yes.
And the majority of the text and the trade books are grant funded. So that's helpful. I think more so for the public too.
What's
Thank you.
not on this page, just to remind you all, is that we are awaiting the state list to come out, so we will be, we are poised to purchase a comprehensive reading program for our elementary students. Once that list is, and that would be grant funded.
Yes,
So
that's fantastic.
super excited,
So on that, once you, I guess, because right, we're only waiting for this, for the state to provide kind of what those acceptable.
Right, there's gonna be, we think, 5
Right.
choices, yeah.
So I remember this budget item being pretty large.
Yeah, it'll be like.
Yeah, like 1.5, that's what I remember. So would that be something that gets like presented at SIP? prior to purchase, like kind of like one of the ones, okay.
Yeah, because that would be considered a full-blown textbook adoption.
Which is huge, right? Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
To a certain degree, textbooks committed suicide in the 80s and 90s, and if you want to know more, look at the dumbing down controversy. Textbooks got, well, they got worse in ways that you'll read about. Teachers came to rely on them less, and then at the same time, the electronic media came in to supplement what textbooks were no longer providing, at, by the way, greater expense and with more graphic cacophony, if I can mix those. Visual equivalent of cacophony. Sorry.
Gary,
Look it up though, it's fun. Dumbing down.
I will.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
So I hate to ruin the discussion, but, so all of these are great discussions, but we're within the 2-week window of doing the budget. And I think at some point we have to wrap around, like, what are we comfortable going into the city as a percentage and trying to back into what we're gonna present as a final budget, just because 2 weeks seems like a lot of time, but it's not. And all of these discussions are great in our regular meetings throughout the year, but, you know, I think we really need to focus on, do people want to add things, do people want to move things, and get to the more actual budget.
Yeah. Sorry, Gary, hold on. The only thing that I had left from our list last week was board clerk that Ellen, I think you had brought up to look at, because within the budget, I think it's one of the only line items where we didn't apply the standard increase.
But for personnel, we should discuss that in executive session.
Okay.
So we can do that.
Okay.
Okay.
We have
That
a
was one of mine
non-union
too.
folks to do anything.
Okay, perfect.
All right. I do. Sorry, go ahead. I know, sorry.
Go ahead, Gary.
I shouldn't have let Fiona go first because now I was gonna say.
No, I'm really too great.
She
Well,
moved us
Mr.
on, so
Sisson,
don't
we-
go back, don't bring us back.
We love data, so the issue of textbooks, the only thing back in my mind always was, are we choosing ebooks, if you want to call them that, versus textbooks because it's more affordable? And hopefully the data tells us that, I know it does, that the textbooks offer more to the student than the ebooks. If the money's needed, we should spend it on a textbook. That's all. I don't know where we stand today. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I feel like we have a nice balance, honestly.
But would you prefer more textbooks, or are you happy with what we have? Is it, will it achieve what we need to achieve?
I think we're happy with where we're headed, honestly. Once we have that K-5 situation, and then, you know, initially, I mean, it would honestly be nice to even move that up through 6, 7, 8 at some point. And the high school, they love textbooks, and, you know, they have textbooks. So,
That's what I'm trying to get at. I mean, it's a budget number, and how much do we really need, rather than what we can sell for. I think that would be.
I don't feel like we're settling, just so you know. That's it.
Sue, thank you so much for the breakdown and this information. That was helpful. But I do have a question on what we've budgeted for electric, page 506 on the small packet, original packet, under budget, line item 5622, with the price of electricity. I think how much was it? 1 point, yeah, it was very minimal. 1% increase, 1.32%. I feel like we should look at maybe increasing that based on today's electric rates and delivery costs, unless we get a discount. We are?
The electric rate is actually set by the city.
Oh,
So
okay,
they negotiate a rate
all right.
and then,
So it won't change from
no,
this?
yeah, it's
It's
a
like
lock.
the gas.
Right, it's a locked in rate. It's negotiated by the city.
Great, thank you.
Locked in for how long?
I honestly don't know. It's,
Aren't they going out to bid again?
yeah, they are. Yeah, I think you're right. It's 2023. Be going out to bid again.
It goes out to bid in 2023. Okay. So would that begin January
We
1
would
of
know that.
2023?
We would know what the change in the bid is because it would also be a change in the city's numbers as well. So that it would be across all departments.
just Fiona, I know, if you go to page 2 of 6, the health insurance, I feel like sometimes that's like a surprise, or there's always some movement there at the last minute, and I was just curious. I'm asking you, but.
We haven't got the final rates yet from the state.
Okay, and when do we get that?
I honestly don't know because this is my first year.
Yeah, it just depends. Usually in the spring.
Is it late
So we're gonna continue to track the rates. We meet with Joe Spurgeon and the city, and then we get a number that's closer. Right now, this is funded at 100%.
The budget reflects 100% based on an anticipated number.
Right.
With the state going to a new statewide IEP system, looking at special ed budget, I know that, is there a cost? I'm trying to remember, because I've been in some of the meetings as far as the new system. I think it's free of charge, but there are some aspects of it that we may have to pay for if we want the full scope of it. Is that included in this?
Right, so it's free and then, okay, go ahead.
I can answer those.
Okay.
I attended all the meetings, no. A couple of things we have to consider. One, we will be maintaining IEP Direct in a read-only mode for 1 year.
Yeah.
Now, there will be ongoing costs when it comes to integrating PowerSchool, and depending on what level of integration, there will definitely be ongoing costs.
Okay.
And also, there'll be a cost associated with any data pulls. The first data pull that we do is free, and then to do a catch-up pull, which we will most likely do, we'll also have a budget for that.
Where would that fall in the budget? Like, would it be under instructional equipment?
Under consultant fees,
Yeah.
under site 10. And sometimes it's under site 12, under 12. I don't think, is Laura online? Is Laura online?
It's.
All right, so we'll check.
Go ahead, Gary.
So Fiona's point about where we end up, I say this every year, especially with inflation and other issues this year. I don't believe that asking for anywhere near enough. We've been cut every year that I've been on. I don't know how to put it into a percentage, but in the past, when we've asked for 2, we get 1. When we ask for 3, we get 1.5. You know, we're asking for 2 point something. I know that this is a bare bones, as it always seems to be, but we need some other areas, so we have some
I think there's more that we.
more things that we need
Yeah.
other than bare bones. So.
Can I just ask that question, is when you spoke with the principals and you got all of those requests, what was the total? I think that always kind of comes up, and I don't know if you ever total that.
We don't total it. Basically, the principals share with us the supply lines, and they enter what they feel like they need. We talk about it, hash it out, say, you know, do you really need more here? Do you need less? Is it, you know, give us the rationale, that kind of thing. The only thing that we did not include and bring forward, the elementary wanted STEM teachers. We want STEM teacher for each elementary. And that was really just to start to build up the STEM programs moving into the middle school and the high school. And then it would also help with preps and common prep time for and coordination of the teachers. So that was not brought forward. And I can't think, I don't think there was anything else. Supply lines, they're so basic. We've gotten used to basic.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just kind of want to, well, frankly, I'm going to say a lot of stuff that folks who've been here for longer than a year have heard before. I'm going to keep it short. You know, I've said this actually every single year that I've been on the board. I have never met a budget increase I don't like. I'm serious. I want to know what you actually want. And I choose that word carefully. I'm not asking for a budget that says what you need. I want to know what you want. You know, and when it comes and we have to deal with the realities of what the city funding is actually going to be and the grant funding is actually going to be, fine. But I think it's helpful for everybody if we start from a place where, you know, you hand us your optimal number, you know, and if that's $100 million, just say that, you know, and you know, we all understand that it's not going to happen, that there's going to be $100 million on the table, but I think it's important to frame what actually would achieve the things that we're talking about here, right? We're talking about, you know, spit clean schools, and we're talking about, you know, achievement for students of all capability levels, and we're talking about reduced class sizes and retention, and a 2% and change budget increase just doesn't get us there, and I think we all know that as much as we wish that it would. It just doesn't happen that way, right? All of this stuff takes money. You know, people like to say you can't throw money at a problem, but you can. You can use that money to hire people to solve your problem for you. And we ought to do that, at least in the hypothetical sense. And I think it would make it easier, because Gary's right, you know, whatever we give them, these aren't people who, despite all the credit some folks have given, these aren't people who go through our budget line by line. They don't know or care what's actually in it, and they don't know or care how it affects the student. But we do. And I think it's important that we show them this is the actual amount of money that it's going to take to educate your children effectively and keep them safe and healthy when we do it. And I really mean it. If that number is $100 million, I just want to know. So I know that it's a lot to ask within the 2-week window, but you know, I think we've talked and generally agreed that we want to see things like more custodians and, you know, additional people in classrooms, right? Whether that's more classrooms in use or more people providing support in the classrooms. I want to know what that's going to cost, and I'll tell you now, I don't actually care as long as it's a real number. Me personally, I'll vote for it. I think the community needs to know what it's going to cost to educate their children, and the city's grant list has grown this year even more than it grew last year. So, you know.
3%, I think it was.
Right, and it was 2% last year. And all that money went to the city departments. And I think there's a case to be made that all that money this year needs to come to the board. We may not have given out inflation raises, but we're paying inflation prices for everything else. And that matters too. That's right. Well, right, we're paying inflation prices for some stuff, I should say. Right, so I just, that's where I have always approached the budget from, regardless of the economic circumstances. I'd really like to see us actually submit something that looks like what you would want to run the school district that you want to run.
You're gonna piggyback off those guys. I think you got it's a very small increase. There's a lot of unknowns going into the next 12, 18 months. I think we should hope for the best and plan for the worst. I think a little bit more of an increase to ask. The worst thing they're gonna do is say no. I'd rather see the facilities guys get a little bit more and the students get a little bit more. That's just my opinion. I'm not really interested in all the nitty gritty, every single line item, just a general overview. But I think it's a small increase in such an unstable environment that we're in now and that we're potentially heading into in the future. There's too many unknowns, and I think we really need to hope a little bit more.
So just, I think between today and last week, right, we've kind of sat here for maybe 2.5 hours. And I think through this meeting, I mean, we came up with custodians, we have that list. We talked about teaching class sizes. I mean, you guys keep talking about increases, but where? What are those line items that we feel like we're not fully funding?
That's the point. Sue could tell us truly what you think.
Based on what we talked about tonight, right.
And identify them so that at least we can say, these are the real needs. These are the real identifiable ones. Because I know here the department does that. And then we fight, negotiate for what we know the priorities are, including if you reduce that class size and more custodians. I mean, kids shouldn't have to raise money to buy, team shirts for volleyball. You know, that shouldn't be happening at high school level, but, you know, we have to raise $4,000 to buy team shirts. That's crazy. You know, when, you know, we're a $79 million budget, but maybe we need $85 million. I don't know what the number is, but this is the year maybe we should try to at least
Look at the
identify.
stuff that we've talked about tonight, at least the custodians and the staffing.
Those are the two we kind of, through all the line items,
Athletics.
kind of landed on.
Athletics.
People solve problems in school districts, right? People educate children, people solve problems.
Fiona?
For me, I think what would be easy to look at this in perspective is year after year, we somehow keep contractual increases, whether it be through moving things to grants or however we do that. But I think when looking at a percentage, if we could say, you know, if we open in August with exactly what we have right now, how much does that cost us, right? So is that a 5% increase, a 6% increase, whatever that amount is, right? And then add to that the things that are important to administration and important to the board, right? Like adding the custodial staff. I'm very interested in coming up with some plan to enhance our school security in every building. And, you know, attaching a dollar amount to that of what percent that is. So here's what we need to move our schools forward, and here are the things we need to survive, right? And I think that we have to also be very complacent that we are an alliance district, right? And we are getting funding from sources to make us better, right? But if you look at that staff we had in 2010, compared to the staff we have now, we went from 46 positions being paid out of grant to 107 of being paid now. What's gonna happen when that bottom drops? You know, and I've been trying to say for years, like, let's keep putting new people every year because, you know,
What's gonna happen?
the states that there are gonna leave soon. And I know we did it with some administrators getting them into the general budget. And I also know that we may do all of this and we may get the same thing that we get every year. We're cutting you $1 million, but
Let the city council decide.
let them decide.
But at least we have something legitimate to go in and say, this is what, I know, yeah, you're right, we always do, but, right, and to Ed's point, we should go in with as much.
And I think that's why I brought what was first brought to you. I think
Right.
that's why I brought that.
What's
And
that
I know
big
that
number?
in the number of years that I've sat here, that number has always been asked for, and it's never been given. And I know it probably seems very unrealistic because you're trying to be fiscally responsible to the taxpayers of the city, but I think they also need to hear what it is that the people who you hired feel is necessary to educate the children who are going to be the future of our town.
That's fiscal responsibility,
Right.
probably the ultimate. I'm not sure.
No, I
And-
understood.
Yeah, so I think that's why I started the conversation, and I'm glad that others have picked up on it, because I know it's been something sitting here that we've always asked, it's always been asked for, and I don't know that that number's ever been given. The very first number.
Right, and that's the budgeting process, right? And I do think that we stand by our budgeting process. I think it's a good one. I really do, that people that are principals work with their sites, that they come bring back what their requests are. I do just want to piggyback on what Fiona was saying in terms of, you know, having our interventionists and our coaches, and we have our EL staff already in our general budget. We have a lot of our SPED staff in general budget, but interventionists, we have about half at the elementary. We don't have as much at the middle school and high school, but we've seen how very needed they are because of those tremendous gaps. The coaches, which have been really invaluable as we moved through this totally unprecedented time. So yes, we can go back, we can look at those numbers, look at those positions and work in something much more solid. And then what we'll do is we'll put whatever increases, not in line items, but we'll put it in one.
Do a separate
one
page.
item.
Yeah,
Yeah, just one account, so that if it gets whittled away, or if it gets changed, or whatever.
it's not a
then
huge
it's
mess.
not crazy, exactly. So just,
Yeah.
but
No,
we
that's
appreciate
fine.
that, and we can share at our next budget.
I think we did something
What's that?
similar last year, right? We came back with the EL last year. which
Right.
was- Yes.
Right,
Right.
and that was included. So I think we will, we'll look
Let's
at
go
this
for it.
again.
Yeah.
We'll talk with principals again, to.
Or even just
to
if you,
consider.
time being of the essence, you kind of know where we're coming from at this point. You
Right.
don't have to, obviously engage, they are all here, so they're listening and hopefully they're already thinking what they need, how many more staff. But just to make it a quick, don't spend days
No, we
on
have
it,
it
just
on-
a high level, yeah. So it's
Agreed.
something we can present and
So,
see, yeah.
I think the other one that's the other hit on that we really didn't talk about too much was the school security. I think you alluded to a couple positions potentially being in.
right, remember that we have
Two resource officers, yeah.
The middle school and the high school, and then the difficulty is, we lost our security terrorists, but we have 3 at each of the high school and the middle school. Those are open positions. Hopefully with the new salary, we'll get some folks. And they can build a team, because I think that would really make a difference, which is nice. But we'll look at it again, and with the dean positions, maybe that will help in secondary as well. But yeah, give us a little bit of time to formulate it, and when are we meeting next?
We have a Monday tentative meeting, Monday night.
So, yeah, well, should determine the time to city council is also going to be Monday.
Is that the 21st? Okay.
I have one more question. Fiona, is there an estimate on how many grant positions may be going into general fund the following year?
Remember that ESSER, ARPA, a lot of those buckets go away. So to start doing that transition now will be important. So I can present that at the next meeting. So we can kind of see the trend. And that's why we're trying to give you the idea of 22, 23. And the next column is really maybe the cliff years, 24. So this is one that says Department 20, and you'll see a lot of those intervention and coaching positions. You'll see how many of those are out of grant funds, ESSER and Alliance. And
What's the Title I, Sue?
Title I is every elementary school except Torrington. They receive Title I funds, and then we make sure that Torrington gets an equitable amount of staffing, supplies, et cetera, out of general budget. Because the state won't recognize Title I, hard as we try to help them understand that we've redistricted, we've done sister schools, they just won't do it. But yes, that's a federal fund. I just want to distinguish that between Alliance
And ESSER, okay.
Can you add the funding here? Or like, or maybe add
sure.
this detail, I don't know, however you want to do it, but add this detail to the other one, or
I think what I'll do is
I think
it's
yes,
probably easier to break it out so you can just see all the positions that are elected, all the positions that are
Yeah.
Title I, all the positions that are ESSER too.
and then we
So
can
it makes
base that
more
out.
sense.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Go ahead, Jess. Is there a mechanism to assess how effective these positions are, like these coaches and these interventions, so that in a couple of years, we can be like, look, we had these coaches, the classrooms where they work, student achievement improved 25% or whatever it is, so that we know what we have to put money into and what's not.
Principals, have you not heard that? Have you not heard that all year long? ROI, are you getting sick of hearing me say that? Yes.
We just want to
Yes,
give you
I
more
know.
money.
Yes.
Well, because obviously, like, we can't always fund everything, and so
Thank you
if
so
you're gonna
much.
make decisions about what we are gonna pull into our budget, we wanna know what's that most
Absolutely.
effective.
Right.
Yep, been singing that song like.
Any, go ahead, Fiona.
So,
Only got 2 weeks.
You just stopped us.
I already closed the book.
there's so much, there's so much going on that I don't want to chase them on, like, creating all this stuff for us. I
Right,
feel like we
agreed.
need to
Right.
say, like, what is the criteria, like, spend all this time coming up with all this stuff that we know we're not gonna get? Or do we say, we're comfortable coming in at 8% increase, and here's our priorities, right? Because, I mean, the city has no
Can we do
line
that?
item control over our
Okay.
budget,
All right.
right? I mean, we have to kind of show how we're coming up with it, but if we
Well, that's why if they just
simply
gave us-
look at the positions in ESSER, right?
Oh.
Look at those. What are we doing with those?
Right.
So, I mean, I think, do we want to put in 50% of the ESSER positions? Do we want to look at the ESSER positions?
That could be it. That would be an easy
Do
way.
we want to increase school security? Here's a dollar amount that we're going to tie to that, whether it be looking at different options to help with school security, custodial, but what percentage is it that we're okay with, right? Because if they come back with
I'm okay with it.
15%,
8%
right?
is a great number.
And then what happens, right? Then we're,
But isn't, sorry,
like, you
like,
just chasing your tail.
I know, but I just wonder if giving the percentage is kind of like fill the bucket versus like, here, I think we've really come up with some good line items that we feel like we're not funding. So I almost want you to go back, and look at what the principals and everyone asked for that they may have missed, it's not in here. The school security we talked about, the custodians, the teacher, thank you.
Have space.
Right? I mean, I feel like her putting together that package may tell us what that number is.
That's
But I think
okay.
it will tell us what that
That's
number is
good.
versus
And
backing
that'll
in.
give us something to look at.
Good, yeah.
But like to Fiona's point, and I think we said this earlier, don't spend a ton of time on it. If you have the numbers, that's okay, right? If they don't spend a
All
lot
I'm
of
saying is there
time.
has to be a count for that, right? So if you're asking them to do this and they come back with 15%, are you comfortable going in at 15%?
Yes.
Or are you comfortable cutting what we're sending them back to produce, right?
Well, but I think we asked for like full custodian, right? So when we come back and look at what the total is, maybe that, is a two-step process.
Right.
I don't know, that's the way that I was
I
thinking
don't,
about it.
I mean, 15%, if it's
But
50%, then we
close
go with
everything and
50%.
Asking them
Then
for a
you
number,
can
let's
know-
just take the number.
Right.
But the number should be based on something concrete.
It should be based on,
Right,
it
right,
should
but
be
if that number is 15%, then that's what it is.
Right.
If it's 8, it's,
And it
it's,
may not be, right? So
Right.
what if we get it and then it's like, okay, well, we feel like we're not gonna get 15%. So let's ask for 6 custodians instead of 8. Let's ask for, you know what I'm saying? Like, we can modify that and then give them something that would still be much more than we have, but not something that's so outrageous or would sound so outrageous that people would reject
And
it.
hitting our key.
Yeah. Our
What you
priorities.
feel is important.
Yep.
So I guess
Hold
my
on,
point
sorry.
is, I think it's dangerous.
You gotta raise your hand.
Glenn,
Do you guys feel you're overstaffed?
You have to,
Do you feel that you're overstaffed?
so this is the thing, we're in a very, very fortunate position because we have all of this money right now.
Okay, that's not
Okay.
the question. The question is, do you feel you're overstaffed?
I think we're never overstaffed,
Okay.
right? Because
So
we
if
are
all this
being
ARPA
fiscally
money is gonna be
responsible.
going away,
Right,
then this is a good opportunity to put it in for an increase so we can retain people.
put it into general budget,
Put
is
it
what
in.
you're saying.
yeah, I've been saying that for years.
Put in
Yeah,
his
being that-
custodians that he needs.
Right.
You know, what else do the kids need to learn? It's
Right.
about the kids, and that's all
What do
about
the teachers
facilities
need
and
to
teachers.
help their job, help their days.
Put it in. Again, worst thing to say is no.
So when are we meeting next? Gotta give me a deadline here.
Well,
Next Tuesday.
Tuesday, we don't
I
have
don't think it'd be
that.
that difficult for us to go through your number and say, okay.
No, but we have to gather this for you,
And
so
that's
I
what I'm
just
saying.
need a deadline.
No, I'm not, for us, I don't think it's as critical as you.
Yeah.
I'm saying, in terms of timing.
Do we have to vote on this at the full board meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, we could have a special board meeting just for budget.
Oh, that's right, because we have until 23rd, 15th. What did you suggest, I'm sorry?
I'm just thinking of the full board on the 23rd, can we do it like at 5?
I don't think we're gonna be ready.
We could move to the 31st. There are 5 Wednesdays this month.
And we have to be done by the 31st, have
Yeah.
to be, because there needs to be a lot
So
of
you're
time
gonna
to
do that.
assemble all the stuff that has to go to the city.
Do you want to meet on the 28th or the 29th? If you want to try and shoot for the 31st, because you're gonna need time to process this, right? or no? You think,
I'm prepared to.
once we, you
Yeah, no, we don't need time.
It's not our responsibility to do
Just
the board
one more
finances
meeting?
job, just bring it up.
Yeah, I think so, right?
We process.
Does anybody- Or email it to us before
5 years.
the 22nd or the 21st.
I'll be ready to-
That's the spirit.
So the 21st, you said there's a conflict though, right? You said it's
That's
also
a
city council.
meeting.
At what time?
It's usually 6:30, but
Could we meet at 5?
It may change the council. Some of us work.
They
Yeah.
can't hear, I don't care.
Oh, we'll change it.
yeah, I know.
We'll change it. So Tuesday.
Okay.
What that doesn't.
don't do that policy too.
For the 22nd? That Tuesday? I always get nervous piggybacking it on a time when we have to, like, be at city council or something like that. It just seems never.
Policy still has to meet, because policy's been postponed, so that still has to happen too.
Okay, so how about like the 28th or the 29th? For budget, does that work?
We have a 29th meeting.
Those are also parent-teacher conferences. Yeah.
But not on the 28th, right? Isn't it?
We do have a meeting on the 16th.
I don't think this is-
Oh, that changed, that's right. No, it's sick. We did it tonight.
On the 16th.
Okay, so how about, does the 28th work?
Monday, the 28th. And then we would have to have
And
a
we could
special
get-
meeting, or would we vote on the budget in that meeting?
No, you have to have a special meeting after it. So at some point, budget has to come into the full board.
Could we
Before
have
we
this
meet.
discussion at the full board?
It doesn't have to be advanced through the budget committee, but that's just sort of a function of how we usually do things.
We're all here
The board
anyway.
is, yeah, the board as a body in whole is the only entity that approves the budget. So if we had to, for expediency, you could have it presented to the full board and just vote. We don't have to have 2 meetings if we don't want to.
So on the 23rd is what you're saying?
I mean, it's possible, whatever is, that, yeah, ultimately, the only 2 things that matter is that the Board of Education vote on the budget and that they do so before the 31st. So it's just a function of how many meetings people want to have in the interim, and how much time you think you need to finalize whatever you'd ask us to vote on. Those are the only things that matter.
We would be ready to present by the 23rd. I think that gives us enough time.
Do we have anything major for the agenda? I mean,
I would suggest we're doing that you have a budget meeting before the full board meeting.
Because otherwise, we would have to move the budget back to the full board tonight. We would have to make that action, and that's not on the agenda. Is it? I mean, do you have to have that on the
Well, they
agenda?
have to just say they're ready to move, and they can actually vote, but I don't think the full board should be discussing that much detail, right? Like, so, and so I'm really concerned about the wish list, right? Because I understand the prospect of the wish list, but just with what we've been talking about tonight, if we just look at our ARPA, our custodians, we're at like a $2 million increase that we're talking about to the existing budget that's been presented.
I don't think that's a wish list. I think that's a.
No, but I'm saying, so then if they now go back and ask everybody, what's everything you want? I just think it's sticky.
She said she has all that.
So I guess I would rather it be reviewed of what do you need versus everything you want, because.
I think that's a matter of semantics. I mean, it depends how you look at these.
Yeah, I mean, I fully.
Depends how they approach the budget, so.
I expect that whatever budget gets brought to the board will be perfectly reasonable, right? I mean, we're not asking 5-year-olds to go make up a board of ed budget, you know? And so like, I think the message is relatively clear that the board would like to see additional staff positions and shuffle some things out of grants into the budget and, you know, make it work and make sure the numbers are real. I don't expect it to be a Mickey Mouse budget. I think the instructions are clear and they've been given to people who are very capable.
go ahead, Ellen.
Can we maybe just say
we authorize for another 2 million in, and where you come up with it within those guidelines, bring that back to us.
Well, that would be your ESSER, ARPA, right, and, probably your custodial, and then some, whatever else. Yep, it's pretty close.
Just to play the other side, are we concerned at all by putting, before we have the ROI that you're tracking,
Yep.
right? Some of that, by putting all of those grant positions in general budget without having evaluated that those are the right positions?
I don't know
But
that
when
it needs
we
to be on that.
When we
I don't
go
think
to the
it's at all.
city, say we put an extra 2 million, all right, we have our whole budget, and then the city says, we're cutting you 2 million, and they're back in grants.
I just think if I was the city, I would be like, but you don't have what you're paying for, you don't have how you're spending those grants.
Yeah, I don't necessarily.
You know, I don't know.
I'm not necessarily super passionate about shuffling every staff position that's in a grant into the general budget. What I want is things that need to be in the general budget, And if that means that you leave people in grants because, you know, it's gonna take you 60 hours to do everything and shuffle everything, yeah, just to have the Board of Finance say, no, go away, then fine. And like, we had this same issue last year where we shuffled positions out of grants and ended up putting them back in. I'm year over year myself relatively ambivalent to what actually pays for someone or something, as long as it gets paid for. So my actual concern and what I specifically would like is whatever is not in a grant right now and also not in this budget submission that you want, put it in here. That's me specifically, rather than move millions and millions of people who already work for the district and just take their salaries and shuffle them over to another budget line item. I think the point is that what are we gonna do with the grant after? Grants are grants, they're supposed to pay for things, and we're paying for things with them. And when they run out, we'll sticker shock the city and put $3 million worth of personnel into the general budget. I don't care, that's not my responsibility to care about the city's bottom line. What I care about is what goes in the budget. That's my perspective, our budget, so that's my perspective.
So obviously, whatever we're presenting, we would evaluate. It wouldn't be willy-nilly, it wouldn't be carte blanche. We'd have to go through and actually see. And we take this process very seriously. So whatever we present to you would still be fiscally responsible, but then also meeting our needs. And I think we always work toward that.
Any other?
What are we meeting again?
I mean, I think the best is the 23rd at 5.
Right.
And would we extend the conversation into the full board, or like, how does that work, or would it end it? Like, if it did decide to go on, you know, if the hour wasn't enough time.
It's a pretty big agenda, that's the only problem.
Can we add potential vote on budget in the full board?
Yeah, we can
Have
do
the
that.
5 to 6, and then
Right.
if we're in a place to vote on it at 6, then we vote on it. If not, then we'd have to schedule a meeting for that Monday, Tuesday. Does that work?
That gives us enough
that
time.
Yeah, I think it's enough time.
Anything else before we adjourn?
Yes.
No? Okay, motion to adjourn.
One more thing, just is there any other, because of this, there's not, so there's anything else people are interested in, they have to know tonight, right? Because those things can't be thrown out next week.
Yeah, no, I think hopefully we've asked all our questions. I have.
Feel free to funnel it through your Fiona, we can make sure
Yeah.
Sue team has it, if there's anything that comes up between now and I'll give you a deadline of Wednesday or Thursday, so they have time. Okay.
Or we can cut it off here and no one.
Yeah, I mean,
I think everybody's pretty much.
we've asked all our
But
questions.
just to have that open, just in case. Okay, motion to adjourn,
So moved.
Second.
all those in favor?
I have a question.
No debate on motions to adjourn.
Yeah, you're adjourned.